Ladies and gentlemen, recorded in Fredericton, New Brunswick, Canada, it's time for Fight Night Picks with your hosts, Craig and Matt Allen.
And what an interesting card we have coming up this weekend. Ketlen Vieira taking on Miesha Tate in the main event. Listen, $100 million UFC Apex facility. They have to pay for it somehow, some way. And apparently it's with main events like this. But listen, I'm really looking forward to this card because as far as the rest of the card's concerned, all of the 11 other fights very well made in terms of the matchmaking. And there should be a lot of fireworks, especially on the prelims. As always, one half your host, Craig Allen. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Craig Allen FNP. With me to my left, to your right, we're back, we're live, and in person, Matt Allen. You can find him on the respective socials at Matt Allen FNP. Now, Matt, less than stellar results last weekend really kind of ended a hot streak. One of us was in the negative, one of us was in the positive, and that MVP race is heating up.
It is.
With Fight Night Picks, we're only separated by one so far. I've had the crown. Matt's really trying to grab that. Now, when we're looking ahead to this weekend, again, I know there's going to be a lot of people put off by this main event. It seems like a bit of a head scratcher. It is a fight that was supposed to take place not that long ago in the main event, but unfortunately Miesha Tate out due to some COVID issues, and it's been a bit of a recovery for her getting to the spot. The woman opposite her, Ketlen Vieira, lost her last fight. Maybe she didn't, but at the same time, we know one thing's for sure. She missed weight coming in at 138, but let's not dwell on that, because this is a very, very good card, Matt. I know there's a lot of fights that we're looking forward to here.
Yeah, you can't let the poor main event overshadow the quality of the rest of the card, because I do think this card has a surprising level of depth for a Fight Night card, and you kind of set this up the perfect way. Not every Fight Night Apex show can be headlined by Max Holloway, Yair Rodriguez. Sometimes you're going to get a Ketlen Vieira versus Miesha Tate thrown in there, but the weird thing is that this fight has major title implications. The winner of this fight very well could find themselves opposite Amanda Nunes the next time out. Now, I know that applies a lot more to Miesha Tate than it does Vieira, but still, a win for Vieira at least gets her into a title elimination opportunity. So this is a very, very important main event, even if you're not a big fan of it.
Should be a good one in the co-main event. Chiesa taking on Brady, and we won't go too much further because we'll flip it on over to our Fight Night Picks Fight of the Night screen, as always presented by Manscaped.
Let us know down below in the comment section who you've got. It's time for the Fight of the Night with Fight Night Picks.
And listen, when we're talking about possible Fight of the Night, it's hard to look away from the main card curtain jerker. We have Adrian Yanez repping Metro Boom and Metro Fight Club, and he's going to be taking on Dangerous Davey Grant. And listen, for Grant, he had the rematch against Marlon Vera his last time out. He was on the wrong end of a decision there, but he didn't look as bad as Frankie Edgar did, so there's always that. And for Adrian Yanez, he withstood probably the most amount of adversity that he has so far in the UFC's octagon when he took on Randy Costa in the first round of that fight. It was looking pretty bad for Adrian, wasn't it?
It really was, but he fought through that adversity, and that's what we like to see from a prospect. It's easy to just have continued success your whole rise up until a title, and then you finally face a little adversity and you start to give up. Look at Shane Carwin. That's exactly what happened to him. But the good thing about Yanez was he weathered that early storm, made it through kind of the in-between rounds, so he was able to collect his thoughts, and then immediately blew the doors off Costa. So it was a great performance. And like you said for Grant, I know he lost to Marlon Vera his last time out, but that was arguably Fight of the Year. That's probably, one of the top 10 fights of the year, I'd say. And he made a very good account of himself and gave it just as good as he took it in that fight. So I think this is going to be a great fight. This is one of those weird crossroads fights where the veteran still has quite a bit of tread left on the tires despite his age, but Adrian Yanez has a lot to prove because Grant is sort of the 16th best in his division. You know what I mean? He's not a ranked fighter. He's not on the, maybe he's one loss away from getting cut. He is a perfect test for a fighter like Yanez.
Dangerous Davey Grant. He's about a month shy of his 36th birthday, but as you said, this is a guy that really had long layoffs between fights, and he's really been able to regenerate almost like Wolverine. He's going to be taking on that really, really tricky boxer in Yanez. I can't wait for that fight. And when we're going with our second selection, I know there's going to be a lot of people amped up for this fight. T-Rex, Terrance McKinney. Do not do any flips or anything crazy if you do win this fight, but he's taking on Francis Faraz Ziam. And Matt, when you talk about guys that can get it done in a lot of different ways, for Ziam, K1 Kickboxing Championship pedigree, he's taking on T-Rex that if you just looked at what he's done in his last 4 fights or so, it's all very, very quick knockouts, but this guy has a little bit of a trick up his sleeve too, so that's what makes this fight so interesting.
Terrance McKinney's like an onion, or like an ogre. He's got layers, and that's the great thing about his game. You know him for his eye-catching knockout power, but he's a really good grappler too, and the thing about Ziam is, he's no slouch on the mat either. He's not one of these kickboxers who, you know, it's okay. If I take him down, the fight's just completely over. He can get back up to his feet, and I think he can make this a very, very fun fight because of his range, and the fact that this is probably going to be contested on the feet. So I really do think this is going to be a phenomenal fight between these guys.
When it's on the feet, Fares Ziam is at his most dangerous. And listen, you're dangerous if you're not checking out Manscaped. You gotta be trimming the hedges and checking them out, manscaped.com. Use the promo code FNP. You're gonna get 20% off your order and free shipping. Check them out. As always, a Fight of the Night screen presented by Manscaped. So 6th ranked fighters on this card. It should be an absolute banger. All different kinds of prospects. Luana Pinheiro kicking this one off against Sam Hughes. We got Yanez. There's McKinney. There's all sorts of great fighters throughout. And there's a main event that we will have some words on. You're not going to want to miss any of it. And if you can't get sick of it, for some reason, if you just enjoy hearing us talk, make sure you check us out on our second channel. It's called 15-Minute Card Breaks, where we talk about sports cards. What do we got behind us today? A Michael Chavis? And there's a button on that one? A button? You're going to want to check it out over there. 15-Minute Card Breaks, as always. Link below in the description. Matt, we're having a fun run with Fight Night Picks as we wrap up this year. And we're going to have a great episode of Question Mark Kicks. When can people check that one out?
They can check it out, 2 hours before the card starts? So you got an hour buffer to get ready for the card. Get your snacks in the oven, go out, maybe grab some adult beverages before the card starts. We always have a good time, though. There will not be a fight companion. Of course, we only do those for the pay-per-view. But yeah, make sure you get excited for the fights like we do before the actual card starts.
2 hours before the prelims every Saturday. There's going to be a link out there way before there normally is. So you can check that out, set the notifications, toss the like, all of that great stuff. Matt, I'm fired up for this card, so as we always say with Fight Night Picks, let's get into it. Interesting fight coming up this weekend at strawweight. Sam Page looking to reverse the fortune. She's looking to get rid of the hat trick that you don't want. She's almost en route to the sombrero. You know that is 0 for 4 in baseball talk, Matt. For Sam Hughes,
it's a turkey in bowling.
0-2 to kick off her UFC career. She's going to be taking on Brazil's Luana Pinheiro. And really different clash of styles coming up this weekend. Because for Luana Pinheiro coming out of Brazil, if there was anybody out there in this world other than Ronda Rousey, an early influence of Luana's, or who else? Geez, I wonder, who just won the PFL season? Oh yeah, Kayla Harrison. Other than those two fighters, Luana Pinheiro has that ability to take Abdulrazak Alhassan's nickname of Judo Thunder, because if you watch the way that she fights, it's absolute insanity for one round. Doesn't really go past that. All of her fights so far in the last number have ended in the first round. 7 of them to be exact, including her last fight, which was her UFC debut against Canada's Randa Marcos. You know, we're from there. She's from here. Different parts, but still. In that fight, Luana Pinheiro went 5 of 6 on her takedown attempts in the round. She went absolutely crazy with her striking. And there are a lot of things to unpack with what I just said, because some of it's positive. A lot of it's actually very negative. Either way, the fight ends in controversy. Because, Matt, so far this year, if the people aren't aware, there's been 2 disqualifications in the UFC. Can you name both of them?
Pinheiro Marcos would be one, and I'm trying to think what the other one is. It doesn't come to mind.
Piotr Jan Aljamain Sterling is sense. The other one. Now, we've had others in the past. I mean, who can I think of? Hector Lombard is a guy that's been on the wrong end of a DQ, but still in that fight. Was she putting it on for the camera? Probably not, and Paul Felder kind of had to reverse his commentary on that one, because at first, it didn't look all that great. But then afterwards, when she's asking her coach, did I lose the fight? As the doctor's there, wasn't the best look. For Luana, Matt, what were some of the things that you liked to see out of her debut?
I really liked her output in the first round, but I know that's going to be a really big talking point in this video, because she's sort of that Paulo Costa mindset, where it's, yes, you burn really bright, but when you throw a crazy amount of output, that's how you get tired. And the problem with Pinheiro is she just throws so much that you do worry about her the second that 5-minute mark is done. And the fight that I'm going to bring up, and I can sort of sum it all up, Sabina Mazow, Alexis Davis. What were we worried about in that fight? We said, okay, Mazow's really good at distance. She has kicks. She's a good grappler. She has the great skills that you look for in a great prospect. But what is her opponent good at? Just being that grit, grind kind of a fighter who, hey, you might win the first round, but that's no problem. The fight starts in the second round. And I kind of see that a little bit in this matchup. Could I see Luana go out there, go 4 of 6 for takedowns, like you had said, 6 of 7 for takedowns in the first round on Sampage, take her down a lot and really impose her will? I could see that. But if that is her game plan, especially early on, that's when I am going to worry about her cardio later on in the fight. And the thing about Sam Hughes is that she hasn't had a great run in the UFC. Let's just call it what it is. It's been a pretty bad one. Now, we have to remember though, UFC debut against Tecia Torres, one of the better fighters in this division's history. And then her rebound performance is against Loma Lookboonmee, who, yes, it's sort of hard to gauge where she is in the division, but still, that's another really talented fighter. So I don't think you can just look at Sam Hughes and her last 2 losses and completely throw away the promise of her skill set.
No, and that's it. I mean, for Sam Hughes, this has been a talking point in every single video I've done to get ready for a Hughes fight, because the craziest part about it is she was supposed to take on Loopy Godinez not that long ago, who's also on this card. There's a lot of former common opponents featured on this card. That was supposed to be about a month and a half or so ago. Sam Hughes, a little bit of COVID protocols on that end, the team, what have you, but she's here, she's ready to fight Pinheiro. So what can we say about Sam Hughes? A lot of volume when she wants to. She can definitely initiate the clinch against a lot of different opponents. She had a ton of success against Vanessa Demopoulos until she got caught in those Hail Mary wild submissions that Demopoulos has. And maybe that's a fight they end up rematching at some point in the UFC. But for Sam Hughes, this is the point that I've driven home every single time I've talked about her. Track and field athlete at Wofford, and listen, she has cardio for days. If you look at it in her fight against Loma, the thing that bugged me, and I thought she was going to have a ton of success in it, was the fact that she's going to go out there and grapple. She's going to go out there and wrestle. You're taking on a pure Muay Thai artist. You're going to have tons of success there. No. Loma went 4 of 8 on her own takedown attempts, and it was almost every time that Sam tried to get a takedown, Loma ended up on top. There's even one at the end of one of the rounds where Sam just kind of pulls down to force the body weight, and Loma ends up on top for the last 10 seconds of the round. And even in between rounds, her corner, she had her main coach, but then she had special guest referee in the corner, future title challenger, bantamweight, Juliana Pena, saying, you got to go in there. You got to grapple. You got to initiate the clinch. That's not going to work against Pinheiro. But again, Pinheiro went 5 of 6 against a really good wrestler, grappler in this division, a stalwart, if you will. Somebody who can just kick out fighters like Lavinia Souza in Randa Marcos. Happy trails. But in this one, Matt, for Pinheiro, my trouble is, and it was the problem that I had when she was coming into the UFC, positionally, not the greatest when she gets the fight to the match. She's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu purple belt. She's a judo black belt. Her dad was a judo master. She learned from the age of 2. That's like Sidney Crosby putting on skates when he's a kid. You know he's going to be a superstar. You knew Pinheiro was going to end up making it this far. And she trains out of a power gym in Brazil, in Novo União. I mean, Pederneiras is her head coach. So all of these things that you love. But crazy output, wild upper body throws. And the third takedown she had against Marcos, if it wasn't an issue and I could show highlights, I would show that. She picks her up, puts her completely in the air, and throws her down. It's stuff you don't see in this division.
You really don't. Like, it's pure filth in the judo area. But this is the point that I keep on going back to. I know we brought up a lot about her takedown attempts her last time out against Marcos. The thing is, Marcos is a really good wrestler herself, and I think Luana is going to be able to take Sam Hughes down. Of course, that's going to be a big part of this fight. I don't think she's going to have to throw that kind of volume to get the takedown, though. I think she can go out there and go 1 of 1, 1 of 2, and maybe be able to conserve herself a little bit better than some of these more eye-catching talents we've seen in the past against their grit and grime opponents. I really do think Luana can go out there, stay positionally aware in the clinch to where, and this is going to be the key, if she can have Sam Hughes up against the cage, not going for takedowns, not striking, just on those in-betweens, because those are going to be the real big key in this fight. If she can just sort of win the minutes in between the big actions of the fight, I think she will be able to win, because that's going to be her way to conserve her energy late. If she can do some of those big actions, I think, maybe 1 or 2 in the first round, win that round, and then start to put it on Hughes later on, I think she'll be able to do it, because my issue with Hughes is she doesn't have that one area of her game that I really trust her to go to that, oh, she's going to be able to stick behind the jab and really use her volume against Pinheiro. I think she might be able to do that, but I don't think she can stick to that game plan for a full 15 minutes, and that's why I really struggle with the Hughes pick. I know we like these kinds of underdogs in this type of matchup where it's more about their cardio and more about the grit and grind than it is about their skill, but I do find myself constantly going back to the Luana pick.
I gotta be completely honest, I completely disagree with the Pinheiro assessment. I'll just explain why. It's the fact that her last 7 fights have all ended in the first round, even the fight against Marcos. She overextends herself on a lot of shots. She is somewhat grappling aware enough that, okay, I can strike in this in between, or in the fight against Marcos where she just blitzes forward, I can wait, time, counter shot, and she looked amazing. Started to kind of teeter off as that first round went on, but I do not have faith in her second round, third round, because I haven't seen it, and she just throws so much output for somebody in this division. Couple the output with the striking, with the wild grappling and the judo throws, those are not recipes to cardio success. Something that Sam Hughes has. So when I look at the odds for this one, Pinheiro open a minus 185 favorite. She's minus 384 right now. Those odds are cooked. Sam Hughes open a plus 160. She's a plus 301. If we look over on Topology, Matt, I'm going to guess over under 80% Pinheiro.
I think they'll be under, but just slightly.
Not even. 705 total votes, 92% Pinheiro. A large majority have her to win this fight by submission, which doesn't necessarily surprise me. But again, I mentioned all of those red flags. I think if you like Pinheiro, you like her in the first round, maybe a little bit in the second round, not so much in the third. Sam Hughes, in her last fight against Loma, was able to rally back in that third round, win it in the eyes of the judges and many. But again, the trouble is, for Sam Hughes, what can she do bigger and better in the first round than Luana can? I just don't know that. So maybe you like Sam Hughes by decision. I'm taking Pinheiro on the fact that I think she's going to be able to get it done round 1, round 2, but not by decision.
This is my problem with Hughes. You lost by TKO to Tecia Torres, who is not a finisher whatsoever. I can't rely on Hughes to be defensively sound for that first round, because that's the thing about Luana. If she is able to land on you in those first 5 minutes, you're going to be a diminished version of yourself for the rest of the fight. And that's where I don't think Hughes is going to have this massive advantage in her cardio. That was the point I guess I was trying to make. So I do like Luana in this fight, but I do agree with you. The odds aren't great on this, especially for the reason that we brought up. How many times have we seen a minus 350, a minus 500, go out there, look really good for 5 minutes, fall off a cliff cardio-wise, and then the underdogs sort of grind their way back in? It seems to happen once or twice every single fight card, so I wouldn't put any money near this fight.
Look out, because Sam Page could be coming. Both of us going with the now 28-year-old Luana Pinheiro. Happy birthday, Luana. Mateusz Nicolau hanging out there too, and Team Novo Nhau. Matt, big-time card coming up this weekend, headlined by Miesha Tate and Ketlen Vieira. You're not going to want to miss that. The rest of the card's great. So keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, we always say. Let's get into it. Quite honestly, this feels like a make or break fight at featherweight. Coming up this weekend, we have China's Shayilan Nuerdanbieke, the Wolverine, and he's coming from wherever they make brick shit houses. He's taking on Sean Soriano, a guy who started off with Black Zillion, stayed there with Hard Knocks 365. He's still there with Sanford MMA. Sean Soriano's a guy that, listen, he has been in Boca Raton, where they sell Wolf Cola, something that the Wolverine might know a little bit about, for the longest time. He's been a stalwart at the gym. He's there with the Michael Johnsons, with the Michael Chandlers, with the Gilbert Burnses. And when Sean Soriano puts it all together, you best watch out. Christos Yagos found that out in the first round of their fight. He had a combination, what was it, left hook, right hook, and then all of a sudden Yagos is on baby deer legs. The first calf kick that Sean Soriano landed in his UFC re-entry drops Yagos. Like, this guy has great power, great technique, and the best part about it is, that's not even Sean Soriano's best part to his game plan. His takedown defense, iffy, but his takedown offense, this is a guy that spent time in high school and in college wrestling, and when things are on his terms and he's rolling, I could paint you a picture of a Jerry West NBA logo as Sean Soriano. And I've said a lot in the last 45 seconds. Hopefully some of it's caught your attention, because for me, Soriano, when he's on, can be a very special athlete. And I mean, listen, the pressure that the UFC put on this guy in his UFC debut was friggin' insane. He fought Kawajiri in a co-main event in 2014. That was the UFC's debut in Singapore. That's insanity. So for Sean Soriano, again, He's gained in certain areas. He lacks in some areas. And Matt, what was the biggest issue that cost him his last fight?
You can't be sprawling, or at least in somewhat of a sprawl position, against a guy like Christos Giagos. And it was just so frustrating, because you set it up perfectly. There's a version of Sean Soriano out there who's kind of like a Daniel Rodriguez type, you know? He can throw with a lot of volume on the feet. He has a good combination of power to go along with that volume. Great technique. And when things do go to the mat, as long as he's not on his back, you do somewhat trust Sean Soriano. But the issue with Soriano is that he almost finds a way to give the fight away. I know this is something that like Chael Sonnen talked about, and Michael Chiesa talked about this too. He's further on up the card, but he'll do really well in a lot of these fights, and then it's almost like he finds a way to get into a submission. Now, against a guy like Giagos, that's going to happen. He's one of the best grapplers in the division. I know he's sort of taken his lumps against some of the elite of the division, but still, if you've watched our videos for any length of time, you know how we feel about Christos Giagos. He is a very, very good UFC lightweight. So the fact that Soriano was able to look really good, at least early on in that matchup, in his return to the UFC, is giving me a lot of confidence in this matchup against Shayilan, because what Shayilan demonstrated in his first fight in the UFC against Joshua Culibao, who's a pretty good wrestler in his own right, was that Shayilan's got some pretty good takedowns of his own, and that's what I keep on going back to. I know he can strike, he's got a lot of great TKO wins on his record, but if you really want to think about, okay, how's Shayilan going to go out there and beat a guy like Soriano? It's going to be hard to match him just strike for strike on the feet. We know how technical Soriano is, and like you mentioned, the high-level training partners that he's with on a daily basis is just invaluable to a guy. Like, I know I was showing you on Instagram before we got on, like, oh, Dustin Poirier and Mateusz Gamrot are training together. Like, those guys are going to make each other a lot better because they're both world-class. That's the same thing for Soriano. I know his record might not be as prestigious, or he might not have the name that some of those other guys at Hard Knocks do, but he's a guy who's been there for a very long time, and he really does have that Henry Hoof version of striking.
Yeah, and he's a guy that's had a really weird career. He's had to kind of reinvent himself a couple of times. Now he's back in the UFC, and the reason why I opened this video saying it's make or break, because I could see a world Soriano loses to Shayilan, see you later, and for Shayilan, you're a UFC PI, what was it, award winner to get into the UFC. There was Shayilan, there was Naliang, there was Aoriqileng, who's also on this card. There were quite a few different fighters that debuted weeks apart or on the same card as each other. And for Nuerdanbieke, he ends up fighting, Joshua Culibao, and in the first round, he does great. And then in the second round, he does bad. He gets outstruck 34-5, and then in the third round, 32-9. For Nuerdanbieke, again, his wrestling is really good. He's one of those guys, he gets it up against the cage. He dumps you down. He stacks guard, and then he does a great job raining down blows, finishing fights when he's on top.
You definitely feel his physicality in there.
That's exactly it. Now, I said he comes from the place where brick houses are made, because look at this picture of this guy. Like, give us your tough pose, and that's what he went with, and it's insane. But when I look at his record, again, he went 5-1 in 2020 coming into this one. His only loss was to Rongju, a guy who, for some reason, for better or for worse, I just have this great idea of Rongju one day cracking the rankings. But when I'm going down through my list, Matt, this is a guy that spent a lot of his career at lightweight. For Soriano, he made that re-entry at lightweight, but that Giagos fight was on short notice. Even the commentary team during the fight said he's going to move back down to featherweight. This one, of course, at featherweight. And again, if I look at it for Nuerdanbieke, he's a classic wrestle boxer where he's going to move forward. He's going to blitz forward, throw a big right hand, and then try and take it down to the mat. Is that going to work against Soriano? I mean, Matt, I've got the odds in front of me. I just wrote them down before we started the video. Nuerdanbieke opened a plus 190. He's a plus 211 thereabouts, best fight odds now. For Soriano, open a minus 225. Minus 260, and if we look at the Topology votes, I'm going to say over under 70% Soriano.
I think they'll be over.
Going to be over 80% of 758 total votes. Soriano, 57% by decision, 32% by knockout. For the 20% that have Nuerdanbieke, 49% by decision, 26 roughly by submission. Do you see this fight ending by finish? And who do you have to win this one?
I could see it ending by finish. I could see this fight going sort of like Bobby Green versus Ally Quinto, where Nuerdanbieke is a very squared up wrestle boxer, like you had said. And the thing is that his entries are sort of predictable. He's not somebody who moves his head a lot to get it to work his way in. Like we've seen, I don't know, Daniel Cormier is a good example, where he would throw a combination, move his head, get in on the single leg, and then work his wrestling game. What Shayilan sometimes does is he will just square up his stance, try to march you down. Soriano can strike off his back foot, and he can throw punches together. So I could see him sort of getting his rhythm early, landing a good combination on the back foot, and putting Nuerdanbieke down. So I'm going to pick with Soriano, but it is hard to say if he gets it done inside the distance.
I mean, when I look at this fight, Soriano gets stuck in a defensive submission. I mean, a Darce choke there by Yagos in his last fight. He was getting back up to his feet or trying to get up off the mat, and all of a sudden, you know what Christo's going to do. It's like Georgi Karhanyan pulling guillotine or Nick Lentz or whoever. You know exactly what Yago's going to do in that spot. Now, for Nuerdanbieke, can he keep that upper body pressure, which, again, now I'm just calling a spade here, but you look at that picture and you look at the way that Shayilan fights, he fights to his body type, and he understands it very well. This is a guy at a China top team. He's got a guy that lost to Khamzat Chimaev recently, and Li Jingliang over on the Instagrams. I think he's going to have, a better game plan coming into this fight than he did with Kulibao, and the other big positive for him in this fight is the fact that he's going to have his team around him. The last time, if you remember, a lot of the fighters, if not every fighter coming in from the PI, was separated from their coaches. They couldn't make the trip. So for Shayilan, good opportunity here. He's already got his feet wet in the UFC. I think it's still going to be a tough night out because for Soriano, we don't talk about a lot of fighters on their back foot being very good. I mean, you made the comparison to Rodriguez. I think it's a good one because for Soriano, he's got that power on the back foot. Plus, when he's behind that black line on the perimeter of the octagon, he can be one of the better strikers in this division. Now, again, this is a philosophical difference. Are you good in the gym at doing it? Are you good in the cage at doing it? I've seen enough from Soriano in the cage that I think he can do it. Do I think he's a future champ? No. But I think he's going to win this fight against Shayilan Nuerdanbieke.
He's kind of like your boy, Lord Olashaychuk, where, hey, on his best day, he can beat a lot of really great fighters, but on his worst day, he's going to have you scratching your head, and he's going to make you think, hey, maybe you should invest a little bit more time into his takedown defense. So maybe Shayilan is able to go out there, really implement a high volume of takedowns, and maybe he'll look great from the first minute, and he'll just be able to take Sean Soriano down over and over and over again. But I agree with you. I think Soriano's shown the capacity to strike on the back foot, at least accumulate the kind of numbers and damage to where he'll be able to win the fight.
Let us know down below in the comments section who you have. Are you going with the Wolverine or the man with no nickname? We are going both with Sean Soriano. Big time fight card coming up. Fares Ziam taking on Terrance McKinney. You're not going to want to miss that. So keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it. Attention, this weekend, the Mongolian Murderer's got a fight coming up. He is known as that by nickname, but Aoriqileng by given name. And he's going to be taking on the ATL's own Cody Durden. And for Georges Durden, this is a guy that in his last fight, there was a lot of bad blood. There was a little bit of pink eye. He had to wear sunglasses on the walk-in. It was weird. And then he tore his ACL in the fight and got submitted by Jimmy Flick. And what Cody Durden didn't know was the fact that Flick was just going to go full see you later, heel turn at some regional MMA promotion and retire after that one. Durden's been pining for that fight ever since. He's been rehabbing his knee, and now he's back in fit fighting form. And this is a guy that in his background, he's got kickboxing experience, boxing experience. Neither guy was all that great, but still, it's experience, and it happens. And what was it? Kickboxing, boxing, and MMA all in like one wild night of fun. And he entered the UFC in maybe not the most conventional way. I mean, this is a guy, didn't really take on the best level of competition on the regional scene, but you see exactly what he does. He strikes the close distance, has a decent leg kick, and once he gets you down to the mat, you're in trouble. You're in trouble, whether it be by ground and pound, by submission. He's going to hold you down, and he's going to try and finish you. And if you don't believe me, go watch his short notice UFC debut at Bantamweight when he took on Chris Gutierrez and beat him 10-8 in the first round, ended up drawing in that fight. But that's how good Cody Durden can be when he's on his best night. And sometimes that just doesn't happen. In the Flick fight, obviously, you know, you're playing the Bob Costas game with your eyeballs, and you're just having a rough go at it. All jokes aside, he has a very tough test this weekend against Aoriqileng, and you can't count him out because he's coming off a performance of the night. No, not even a performance of the night. A fight of the night against Jeff Molina. That was UFC 261, Usman versus Masvidal 2. Aoriqileng put on in that fight. Now, did he get 10-8 in the third round? Maybe. Did he lose the second round? I don't know, maybe. But he made it a highly competitive fight, and as they say, it takes two to tango. So for Aoriqileng, pretty successful debut.
We always say this when we set up our Fight of the Night screen. It's, hey, we think this guy is going to win for X amount of reasons, but we don't have this as a Fight of the Night screen because we think it's going to be some one-sided beatdown. And I think we have to sort of do that in review of Aoriqileng's fight with Jeff Molina because that really is the key. not only did he take an absurd amount of punishment in that fight, he hurts Jeff Molina with like 10 seconds left. And I know people say this a lot. Oh, if Cody Garbrandt had 5 more seconds against TJ Dillashaw in their first fight, what could have happened? If Archie Long had 10 more seconds against Jeff Molina in their fight, we don't really know what would have happened. Like, he had him rocked and he had him hurt. And the really neat thing about that fight was that Archie Long had a lot of questions around his game entering that fight. And the great thing was, even in a loss, he was still able to answer a lot of those questions that we had. He himself has a great level of volume in his strikes. He's a much more technical guy than I thought he was upon his UFC entry, because he was able to show that if he is able to get some of his inside techniques off, he's got a good elbow, he's got good straight shots up the middle. There's a lot to like in there. And if you know who Jeff Molina is, surviving a fight like that with a guy like Molina proves to me that you at least belong. Yes, it might be a blemish on your record, but kind of like Dana White said about Yair Rodriguez after his loss to Max Holloway. Like, no. His stock doesn't fade whatsoever. There's some good losses and there's some bad wins, and Archie Long had himself a good loss his last time out, and it was a performance that he can build on, because the great thing for Archie Long is that he has that great fight with Jeff Molina. Molina becomes not a superstar off that, but definitely a more well-known unranked fighter than most. And then Molina's able to still look good after that. So if Long is able to get up a really nice win against Durden, let's say he is able to defend some of those early takedowns, really work in some of that volume like we saw against Molina, then it's not an immediate rematch that we're going to see in a year or 2 years, but that's one of those really fun fights you can match up later on down the road if and when both guys ever do enter the rankings.
I mean, that's a weird misnaming you went with there. Just calling him Long. It'd be like calling her Joanne Calder at this point. Just a little strange there, Matt. Archie Long. You call him the Mongolian murderer. You can call him Archie Long. You can't call him Keelang Aori. That's just ignorance. Right. That's just straight up ignorance. But if you look at our fighter out of China, this is a guy that 3 of his 6 losses are by submission, something that Cody Durden can definitely capitalize on, especially with his groundwork. But when it comes to the stand-up, I 100% side with Archie Long in this fight.
Well, the thing about Durden is that he really does use his forward aggression as a way to get into his wrestling game. I know we say this about a lot of fighters. Marvin Vettori's going to always be the poster boy for it. But Durden does sort of lack some of those in-betweens. Like, I don't think Durden can intelligently defend his head the way some of those other wrestle boxers can, and that's what I keep on coming back to in this fight. Can Durden take him down? Yes, probably. But I think Archie Long is going to be able to get back up. And he was able to put on a really good pace in a fight where he took a lot of punishment. People say this all the time. Like Michael Bisping said, hey, it's really hard to run a marathon. I'm sure those guys are tired. Imagine beating those guys up before the marathon and then getting them to run the marathon. They're going to be a lot more tired afterwards. And Long proved that I'm not worried about him losing the first round in this fight. I know he's going to be able to rally late, and that's what I do like his ability in this fight with Durden.
Matt just digging into it, calling him Long. So in this fight,
I said Archie Long like 3 times.
The thing that scares me a little bit for Archie Long coming into this one, he was a career bantamweight before his last fight. That was his first ever fight at flyweight when he took on Molina. We didn't see any issues in that one. Did he slow down a little bit as it went on? He won the first round. He lost the second round. Jeff Molina, it was like he lifted a boulder in the third round when he picked up his output. But at the very end of it, there was one guy throwing power shots and doing a very, very good job of it. So when we look at the odds for this one, Archie Long opened a plus 125 or thereabouts, plus 116 right now. For Cody Durden, he opened a minus 145, minus 141. We're having a look at the Topology votes now. We haven't looked at them yet. I'm going to say over under 55% Durden.
I think Archie Long's going to be the favorite. That was the first time I said it.
No, it wasn't. 798 total votes, 65% Durden, 82% by decision for the 35% that have Archie Long. 60% by decision, 28% by knockout. This is one of the ones that I've had a hard time going back and forth with because it is a clash of styles. I don't know how good Archie Long's defensive chops are for wrestling. I've seen it in the past where he's gotten taken down. I've also seen him obliterate guys on the feet. If you want an example of that, it was when he took on Abdullayev and hit him with a wild left hook and crumples him in front of the cage. He did a great job in that one. Really wide stance, really good power shots, and good volume too. So I like Archie Long for what it's worth in his game. Durden might have that X factor though. I don't know.
The issue with Durden, though, is his X factor is his well-roundedness, if anything, and I think it's going to be tough to just be that really well-rounded guy when you're fighting someone like Aoriqileng, because unless you are able to implement your own offensive takedown, which I don't doubt, like, I think Durden's going to be able to get at least one takedown in this fight. The way I look at it, though, is if he gets that takedown early in the fight, I think Aoriqileng is going to be able to scramble on the bottom enough to not get submitted, at least in the first round. Once fatigue sets in, maybe it will be a different story in the second, third round, but I think at least early on, he'll be active enough on the bottom to not get submitted early, and then if he is able to start the second and third round on the feet, I do like his gas tank, and I do think it will be able to hold up for those rounds in this fight, so I will predict Aoriqileng to win this, but I do think this could be a really, really fun fight, just because Aoriqileng has one of those styles where every single time he gets into the cage, he's going to be one of those fight of the night contenders.
And I mean, if you look at it for Aoriqileng, out of the 5-1 in, that knockout over Hizri Abdullayev that I mentioned, one over Amirov, again, when you start to go into level of competition,
Salty.
It's not very good. I like Durden, and I like him for the fact that, again, if you blitz forward against a guy like this, you're going to be in for a bad night. But if you're able to just go back to the well with the takedown attempts, really rinse and repeat, you're really going to zap everything out of your opponent.
It's going to be hard to keep up that pace, though.
100% it is, but we've seen it from Durden in the past that he can just continue to go to the well with some of those takedowns. Up a weight class against one of the craziest leg kickers you've ever seen in the modern, well, not even the modern day. In all of the days.
Okay, you're selling pretty high.
Going with Cody Durden in this one. We're in disagreement over the picks, so we want to hear from you down below in the comments section. Do you have Aoriqileng to win? Do you have Cody Durden? We have a big-time card coming up. Terrance McKinney's fighting Ziam, and I'm fired up for it, so make sure you check that one out. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, as we always say. Let's get into it. Coming up this weekend, straight up my favorite fight on this card, we had T-Rex Terrance McKinney looking to make his Cam Newton return. I'm back, and he's coming back off of that crazy win in his debut. It was over in 7 seconds when he knocked out Matt Frivola. Then he got crazy with the end, and he T-Wrecked his knee, so he's been off for a while. He's going to be taking on Francis Ziam, a guy that personally I've been negative about in the past, but I think he's got some big X factors coming up, especially in a meeting with McKinney this weekend. This is a guy, he's coming from K1 kickboxing lineage, and if you look at it for Ziam, since he joined the UFC, yeah, you're going to lose to Don Madge, a PFL fame, but his last 2 fights against Jamie Mullarkey and Luigi Vendramini, both wins on paper. They were very close fights, and I can really give a conversation either way. However, when the fight is standing, Ziam can beat a lot of lightweights in this world, and he has a great opportunity coming up this weekend against Terrance McKinney. Both of these guys, I think, have very interesting ceilings in this division, too.
I couldn't agree more. And the great thing about Ziam is that, yes, those 2 past fights were really close, but the level of competition's pretty good. Like, Luigi Vendramini, okay, maybe public perception's not great of him, but still, if you know, you know. And if you know, he's a pretty talented fighter and a very well-rounded one at that. And we all know how good Jamie Mullarkey is. Like, he's extremely well-rounded, he's got great power. So, I do agree with you. Very close fights, but still, it's not like he's having close fights with guys who are fresh off Contender Series. Now, on the flip side, Terrance McKinney's one of the more interesting prospects in this division right now, because a lot of people will remember Paddy Pimblett gets his great UFC debut, looks great against Vendramini, gets rocked, knocks him out, and then people are saying, hey, does he have the best UFC debut of the year? Is he kind of the rookie of the year? And there was another UFC lightweight who was very open to disagreeing with that, and it was Terrance McKinney. He was like, hey, I knocked out Matt Frivola in 7 seconds. Why is nobody talking about my shine? And I think it is time to give Terrance McKinney his flowers, because he's shown an evolution in his game as of late, which has been really, really impressive.
Let's talk about it, because for McKinney,
what I was going to do.
Everybody just assumes that he's a guy that gets it done with his hands, right? Like, you look at those last 4 fights, done in 16 seconds, 17 seconds, a minute 12, and then 7 seconds, knocking guys out cold. Matt, what's his primary skill?
If you've been paying attention to the countdown this week, you'll know that his high school wrestling coach is on this card. He's been wrestling with guys like Michael Chiesa since he was in high school, and that really is the Terrance McKinney sort of back pocket trick, if you will. He can always go to his wrestling base. Now, is he one of these like JUCO national champion wrestlers? No. Is he a Curtis Blades type of wrestler? No. But is he someone who has really good MMA wrestling? Yes, and I really do think that's the key to this. You can't always look at a guy's accolades and all of a sudden think that that's going to translate to MMA. Like, Yoel Romero is probably a good example of that. Is he a good wrestler in MMA? Yeah. Is he the best MMA wrestler ever? Probably not, if we're being honest. Like, there's other guys out there who are better, even though he's the one with an Olympic gold medal. Terrance McKinney's another guy who sort of proves that even though he doesn't have the collegiate background or the wrestling or the Olympic background, he's got really good MMA wrestling and is going to be a big factor in this fight because at range, Ziam's a guy who not only can put a lot of volume together, he's somebody who can start mixing in combinations early on in the fight. And if you're caught 6 feet away from him because it seems like he can hit you from across the cage, it's going to be a really, really long night in the office for you because you're so far away from him that it's really hard to get your entries on any of your strikes or your takedown attempts.
The craziest part about this, people will disagree. If this is the thing that's clipped out there, if this becomes a YouTube short, I might look stupid, but here's the deal. Ziam is a better striker than Terrance McKinney. Terrance McKinney's great at blitzing forward and knocking guys out. You saw that in his last 4 fights. Terrance McKinney is a better MMA fighter because he can mix in his wrestling, and when he does, and he's on, and he doesn't make any mistakes with his grappling, he's a great fighter. I mean, look at it. When he's fighting Sean Woodson on Contender Series, he's beating Sean Woodson until he goes in, makes a dumb mistake, and then leaves himself totally exposed to a flying knee knockout for Woodson. Now, how good Sean Woodson, you might say? Well, he looked pretty good last weekend, I thought.
Tanks.
Just thrown to the body all day. So when I look at it for McKinney, you take that fight into account. Okay, he loses that fight. Then he goes out on a regional show. It's Contender Series against Contender Series. Derek Minner, Terrance McKinney. What does McKinney do? I'm going to wrestle. What does Derek Minner do? I'm going to submit him. And that's exactly what happened. So for McKinney, against very, very good primary grapplers, he might struggle with some of that jiu-jitsu, some of those in-betweens. Minner's a great guy in that respect. But when it comes to stringing everything together, that's what Terrance McKinney's great at. The trouble is, if you try and strike against a long-rangey guy and blitz in, we've seen what happened to him against a guy like Woodson. Ziam has a great opportunity to do something just like that. So in a fight like this, I have a lot of hesitations about going McKinney hard or going with Ziam quite hard as well. Because for Ziam, what's he struggled with? 3rd rounds against Luigi Vendramini? Takedown defense? Well, everybody knows that he's pretty well a pure kickboxer, so they just hammer away at the takedowns. Sometimes Ziam can grab one underhook and at least keep it up against the cage, but when he's stationary and he's striking from the clinch, he's at a giant disadvantage in his fights.
He really is. And the frustrating thing about Ziam is that his technique's good, his hand speed's good, his combinations are good. He doesn't really have great power on the end of his shots. I know he's got great striking acumen and a great striking background, but he's just not somebody who can go out there and really get one of those one-hit quitter knockouts. And it'll be really interesting to see what happens in this fight if McKinney has success early, especially with his strikes. This could be one of those weird Bizarro worlds where maybe McKinney gets a knockdown early and it's the worst thing that ever happens to him because then he gets confident with his power and he is sort of just getting picked apart on the outside trying to set up another one of those big overhands. The flip side is if McKinney can, and I think you set it up perfectly, just be that smart MMA fighter that we know he can be, then I think there's more than a big opportunity for McKinney to win. This is the thing that people got to remind themselves. The knockouts are recent. Like, they're a recent phenomenon. Now, that can be taken 2 different ways. Carlos Condit, before he went to the WEC, had a lot of submission wins against lower levels of competition. And for McKinney, some of that is true, to be completely honest, but McKinney is far more likely to take this to the mat out of these 2 guys. And I don't think Ziam can create separation. I guess that's the last thing I want to say. Ziam, like you said, is good at digging the underhook, but he'll just kind of sit there afterwards. You can hold him up against the cage with the underhook, and I do think that if McKinney doesn't just get discouraged after that initial takedown attempt, and if he does stay glued to Ziam, I think he's got a pretty good path to victory.
Matt, weird one in terms of the odds, because if you look at it for McKinney, open to minus 180 favorite, he's a minus 115. Ziam open to plus 155, he's a minus 105. So McKinney is slight favorite right now. Expect the odds to kind of narrow into par as the week goes on. Topology picks. We haven't seen them yet. Let's have a look. 828 total votes. 77% McKinney. 74% by knockout. For the 23% that have Ziam, 68% have him to win by decision. Again, for Terrance McKinney, Matt touched on it a little bit. The knockouts, a recent phenomenon. You look at it. McKinney, all of his wins by finish. But you kind of leave out the fact that he won all of his early fights by submission. Won his first 4 fights by sub. Rear naked armbar, heel hook. Then he beats Jeff Coleman, who's what? 0-4 by 7-second knockout. Beats Bobby McIntyre, 9-5, rear naked against Sharon Spain, who was 16-30. Then he fights Woodson, then he fights Minner. Again, the level of competition is a little worrisome when you look at it for Terrance McKinney, but his last 4 fights, the quickest knockouts you're going to find. And yes, they're super impressive. Blitzing against Ziam is a bad idea. It's just a bad idea. That's how you get caught against a really pure striker. So for me, I like McKinney's well-roundedness, but I have so many reasons not to throw him on a card. I'm going with McKinney, but it's not the most confident pick.
Ziam just doesn't have power. That's why I like McKinney. If he had more pop at the end of his shots, I would agree a little bit more with your assessment of him being able to crack McKinney on the way in. But the thing that you need is big one-shot knockout ability. And with Ziam, he does string together a lot of his shots, which could be interesting. Let's say he does go to the body early of McKinney. Maybe he can start to pull apart late, but we've seen cardio be a bit of an issue for Ziam in the past. So this should be an interesting fight if it does make it to the third round, but I do have McKinney.
The last knockout win for Ziam was against Ebner Lavares, who was featured on Contender Series, The Ultimate Fighter, and ended up with a one-hitter quitter against Chris Grutzmacher, who we're going to be talking about later in his UFC debut. Matt, both of us going with Terrance McKinney in this spot, but really want to hear from everybody down below in the comments section. Are you going with the American? Are you going with the man out of France in Ziam? Was on a nice little 2-fight win streak. Let us know down below. Keep it clean in the comments section. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, and as we always say, let's get into it. Interesting fight between a couple of prospects at 115 pounds. We have Thailand's Loma Lookboonmee coming in here, riding a full head of steam, 2-fight win streak, taking on the Mexican-Canadian Lupe Godinez. And in this fight, the interesting thing is, for Godinez, she tried to do the Khamzat Chimaev. It did not work out. She weighed in, 121.5? Took on Luana Carolina. At the start of the week, I said, yeah, Lupe's winning that fight. And then as we approach the fight day, we got the after effects. We get to see what she looked like on weigh-in day against Carolina. On question mark kicks, I went, no! She's way too small. And yep, the size definitely played a factor in that fight. That was somebody who thought that they could move up to 135 and challenge Sarah Alpar, which probably wouldn't have worked out all that great. So Matt, we're here again. And for Godinez, it's been a mixed bag in the UFC. She could have beat Jessica Penne. I thought she did. You thought she did. Some people didn't think she did, so she loses that fight. Then she takes on an older lady making her UFC debut in Silvana Gomez Juarez, who I think is a very, very good striker in the women's strawweight division. She's got another fight book. She's an interesting prospect coming out of Entram Gym.
She's not a prospect.
Over in Tijuana. And in that fight, Godinez looked amazing. And then against Carolina, she looked very bad. So all I will say about Godinez is you got to try and take little bits and pieces from all of her UFC fights. The highs are very high. The Gomez Juarez win, that was quick. The lows are very low, like moving up on short notice and fighting somebody that really just didn't make a lot of sense. So let's shift that from Lupe over to Loma Lookboonmee. She's training out of, and this is going to be like a record scratch for a lot of people, not Tiger Muay Thai. She's training out of Bang Tao Muay Thai and MMA. It's the Hickman Brothers' new gym over in Thailand. And listen, is the gym completely all the way together? Not 100%. Where did you get this knowledge, Craig? Well, friend of the show, JHK MMA. I hit him up. I said, I saw you were in Thailand. You were wearing the John Jones sign at Fight Circus. What do you know about the gym she's at? He took a picture of it. He sent it my way. He helped us out. So credit where credit's due. He's doing great work over with the South China Morning Post on their MMA side, as well as All-Star. Now, when it comes to this fight, Matt, Loma has shown this vast improvement in one aspect of her game. Can you tell us what it is?
Oh, so you're a wrestler now? Like, okay, again, I'm going to bring up the Josh Allen accuracy for a quarterback. Like, if you're a lifelong striker, and if you've been doing Muay Thai since you're a child, normally you don't just learn how to do takedowns in one training camp. Normally it takes 2, 3, 4 training camps. How many times do we say this? Someone switches gyms, and in that first fight with that new gym, they might incorporate 1 or 2 of those skills that we know from that gym, but it takes a little bit more time for them to sort of fully buy into that system. With Loma Lookboonmee, it's kind of like she woke up one day. Our great-grandmother told me this, God rest her soul. She said, hey, I quit smoking because I just woke up one day and said, hey, I'm too old to be doing this anymore. Loma Lookboonmee's kind of like that with her wrestling. She just looked at herself in the mirror one day and said, hey, I'm too good of an MMA fighter to have this be such a liability for me. And that's a really nice thing to see, because how many fighters do we know? They just keep on doing the same thing over and over and over. And yes, they might win some, they might lose some, but for the most part, they just stay a stagnant fighter and the same version of themselves throughout their whole UFC tenure. we cannot say that about Loma Lookboonmee because, like you had set up, she's been able to add the offensive takedown into her own repertoire, which has been really interesting because for the longest time you would assume, okay, Loma's going to go in there, use her good low kicks, use a lot of volume, work her way into the clinch, and just destroy ladies on the inside. Now she uses the clinch a lot of the same ways, but she's not using her entries to create a lot of damage on the inside. She's using it to mix in her takedowns now, which has sort of been a double-edged sword, if we're being honest. Like, Angela Hill was able to out-clinch her now. I'm sure a little bit of that had to do with the size because Angela Hill is so much bigger than Loma, but we have seen, I guess, volume be an issue for Lookboonmee. If you are able to get out to a bit of a lead on her, she will struggle to make up the difference, but I do really like the evolution that we've seen out of her game. And the interesting thing for Godinez is I still look at Godinez and I still think, wow, she's the more well-rounded fighter in this fight. She's the person who I guess goes to the takedown a little bit more often, although Lookboonmee's been able to add that into her toolbox. But I guess I'm going to switch it over to you on this. I think Godinez is the more likely one to go for the takedown. What do you think her takedown numbers will look like against Lookboonmee? Like, if she goes for 10 takedowns in the first round, do you think she's going to be able to get 7, 8, 9 of them? Or do you think she's going to struggle and only be able to maybe get 1 or 2?
I mean, the craziest part about this one is the fact that neither one of these women is overly big for this division. I mean, if you look at it for Lookboonmee, she's more of an atom weight than she is a straw weight. And for Lupe, yeah, maybe I'll fight at 125, 135. What do you make of her long-term prospects at 115?
It's really interesting, and I know we have a different opinion on this, because for me, I put Godinez in one of these categories, where she's kind of like a really good role player in the NBA. You do a lot of things really, really well, but when you're fighting the Marina Rodriguez's of the world, when you're fighting the upper echelon of the women in strawweight, what is your bread and butter going to be? Because I don't think Godinez is someone who, against the upper echelon, is going to be able to grapple with the likes of like a Mackenzie Durden, to be able to strike with someone like Marina Rodriguez. That's really where I do feel like her key is always going to have to be mixing her martial arts, and that's why this is going to be a great litmus test for her. I've said this a lot, where it's been sort of hard to gauge how good Godinez is based on her 3 fights in the UFC, because her wins over someone she should have won, let's just be honest, and her losses are kind of weird. Like you had mentioned, her UFC debut was a very close fight with Pinheiro. No one really knew what Pinheiro was going to look like after her long layoff, and her last matchup was on short notice, up a weight class, so there's been a lot of question marks throughout her UFC tenure up until this point, and I'm just glad that in this matchup with Lookboonmee, at least we're going to get a few more answers, because if you beat Lookboonmee, at least it proves to me that there's a spot for you in this division.
To me, this is kind of like Kenny and Dolly's Christmas album, because this matchmaking is just making it a Christmas to remember. And when I look at the odds for this one, Loma and Godinez, they both open at par, minus 110. For Godinez, about a minus 150 favorite. For Lookboonmee, plus 125. We look over in Topology, Matt. Again, we talked a lot about Loma. We talked about Lupe and how weird it's been in the UFC. But one thing's for sure. If she brings everything together, she's a blood and guts striker. Now, sometimes she gets hit, which you worry about. I mean, her fight against Demopoulos, she wins the first 3 rounds, but the last 2, she starts to get hit. It's a bloody mess. When she fights Lindsay Garbat, she beats her by decision, and Lindsay's a long-time MMA veteran. You can say a lot of different things about her. You can say that her record is kind of shoddy, but she's a good fighter. Good litmus test again. Lupe's had these little checks and balances her whole time up, and in that fight, hardly even a scratch on her. So, again, there's differing, variances for Godinez, but her striking defense makes me worry a little bit. But one thing she has, blood and guts in the striking department, but just that undying, unwavering will to just keep trying to take people down and press the action forward. So we talked about the odds. The Topology votes for this one, 701 total votes, 64% on the underdog with Lookboonmee, 87% by decision. For the 36% that have Godinez, 77% by decision. Matt, I'm going to say this and then I'll throw it off to you. I think Godinez is going to win this fight, but it is a very close one, and I'm actually not that surprised that the odds differ from the Topology picks.
This fight could go any number of ways, and I guess this how will set up Godinez, and this will be the last basketball reference for at least a few videos. Godinez is one of those players that you'd hate to trade because she would become an all-star on another team the second she gets there. Like Tracy McGrady with the Raptors. He was good for the Raptors, but the second he went to Orlando, he became one of the best players in the league. That's kind of how I see Godinez. When she isn't able to put it all together, you do worry about her because her takedown abilities are good but not great. Her striking's good but not great. But when she is able to put it all together, that's when she will be able to get into the rankings and finally become that type of fighter. This is where I keep on going back to. This fight is going to be fought a lot in the clinch. I don't think this fight's going to be the most fan-friendly of fights at all. I really do think both are going to be shooting for their own takedowns, and I really do think it's going to come down to the takedown defense of Loma Lookboonmee. She's very short, which I think helps her in this division. She's a very strong fighter for this division, and she's shown the ability to dig underhooks very effectively. And that's why I do like Loma Lookboonmee in this fight. I think she's going to be able to stuff at least the early takedown attempts of Godinez. And if this fight does play out as a 50-minute striking match, I do like Loma's activity rate and her technique in this one.
100%. I mean, training with the Hickman brothers, Bang Tao, Muay Thai, and MMA's own. She's got a great opportunity in this fight. So both of us split on the pick. I'm going with the Mexican-Canadian in Godinez. Matt going with our fighter out of Thailand in Loma Lookboonmee. You let us know down below in the comments section who you have in this dynamic fight in a very dynamic weight class of strawweight. Couple of wins right up to the tippity top. Matt, it is such an interesting card. If you missed the video, Terrance McKinney taking on the man, Faraz Ziam. My favorite fight this weekend, but there's so many great ones littered throughout. Chiesa taking on Brady in the main event. Vieira taking on Miesha Tate. Yeah, keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, as we always say. Let's get into it. Interesting fight coming up this weekend at lightweight. We have the long-awaited debut of the lone rookie on this card in Israel's Natan Levy. He's going to be taking on gifted Rafa Garcia, a guy I was sold a bill of goods on, and I still haven't received it because, Matt, whether it's Campbell McLaren that's selling the goods, or whether it's the fans over on the Underground Whisper Network, be it Twitter, be it Reddit, I expected, and personally, it was me, expected a lot out of Rafa Garcia coming in from Combate because everything I saw over there was overwhelmingly positive. And if you just looked at Rafa Garcia's Instagram, you'd see him training with some of the best athletes, not just in this sport, but in this sport, in different disciplines at some of the biggest gyms. Ruka Sport. Who else is he training with? Cub Swanson. He's trained with Justin Gaethje. Now, the craziest thing is, I read an article here in the last couple of days, and I won't tip my hand as to where, but you might be able to figure it out. It's somewhere that I frequent for my articles on prospects and different people, and it was along the lines of, and I'm being very cryptic here, but Rafa Garcia coming into this fight, great training camp. This time it's with Justin Gaethje. This time it's at Denver. And I kind of sat there a little puzzled because somebody might read that and go, oh, well, that's great because his cardio failed him against Chris Grutzmacher after he went balls to the wall in the first round. He had not as much left in the second and third. Now, he did continue to wrestle, and he had a little bit of success there, but in the stand-up, it wasn't there anymore. My trouble is, I racked my brain, and I said the same thing before his fight against Chris Grutzmacher. He was doing the same training. He was training with Gaethje in Colorado, and he was back home in California. That's all great, and I still think it's great. But not everybody that trains with all these big names, they can do it in the gym. They don't necessarily do it in the cage. Look at Chris Tuxisher. When was the last time you heard somebody talk about him? I talk about him all the time. Why? Because he was a giant shadow behind Brock Lesnar.
He was.
He was that guy. What was his record? At one point it was like 21-1 and 21-2. And it's like, wow, Chris Tuxisher, he's the next one. But he wasn't. Rafa Garcia had so much success outside of the UFC. He's so good at closing distance, boxing to clinch, take you down, submit you when you're on the ground. I've talked a lot about Rafa Garcia, not a lot about Natan Levy. Matt, for Garcia, short notice debut against Nasrat Haqparast. You're not going to beat Nasrat Haqparast, and that's fine. But he had some success. It was a close enough fight. But his last time out against Chris Grutzmacher, this is one of those fights, and I hope this is where you're going to go with it when I hand it off to you. This is that classic JSP Joe Lozon fight of, okay, you should blow the doors off Chris Grutzmacher. And he almost did. And then the second and third rounds were nowhere near the first round, and he looked like a shell of himself.
That's the thing with Rafa Garcia. I thought he looked pretty good in his loss to Nasrat Haqparast, if we're being completely honest. It was on short notice. We know how good of a boxer Nasrat is. Garcia boxes him up at a few different occasions in that fight, so although he loses against Haqparast, it at least gave you confidence with him moving forward that, okay, some of the skills we saw him demonstrate outside the UFC are going to transfer over against the best competition in the world. But the fight against Chris Grutzmacher was like the worst version of that loss, because I had a lot of confidence for him going into that. We all know my feelings about Chris Grutzmacher. He's well-rounded, I'll give him that. But he does struggle against people who specialize in really anything. But what Rafa Garcia showed was that if you do push any kind of a gas tank, although his his technique might look good in that first round, when his cardio's gone, so's the technique, so's all the sort of things that make him unique.
Which is kind of a deviation from the mean, because normally Garcia's a guy that can push a high pace and fight through with a good work rate.
And that's what really made me worry about him fighting guys at this level, at least consistently, because when you struggle against a guy like Grutzmacher, who has shown, like, listen, he got knocked out by Artem Lobov, you know? Like, Artem Lobov's not a bad fighter, but...
You'd get knocked out by him.
Okay.
I would.
All Artem Lobov does every day is practice knocking people out. I'm way better than Artem Lobov at cooking. You're way better than Artem Lobov at, like, selling things. We're all good at our own stuff. This is the thing about Garcia. I think he's good in a lot of aspects. Like, his good stats are great, but he does struggle with some of the in-betweens. If you're a really good wrestler, you can take him down, although he's got good submissions, and not worry all that much. He's kind of like Jacare, where you can hold him down like Jack Hermanson did without a crazy threat of submissions off his back. Now, if the tide turns and he gets on top, he's a very, very dangerous fighter. But my big thing with Garcia is that once he fatigues, his hands get very low, and he sort of loses all of his defensive capabilities. And when you're fighting a guy like Levy, who has... I mean, pinpoint accuracy might not even do what his strikes are justice. You're going to have a really hard night in the office, because if you aren't able to get that takedown really early, if you aren't able to push such a pace early to where he fatigues due to your volume in the first round, I think you're going to have a really hard night out in the office.
So you got Garcia on the left-hand side, you got the man chiseled out of marble, and you can't see his thighs in that picture, but they're friggin' ginormous in Natan Levy. And why do I say that? This is a guy with... You'd read his stats off a page, and you'd read what he's actually good at, and then you watch his fights, and you go, what? Like, seriously? Are you kidding me? Now, a lot of Levy's pictures over on the Instagrams, he's got the gi on, he's a karate guy, and that is it. Like, I mean, I have this in my notes here, because you need to have this kind of stuff, is the fact that he's a black belt in karate. He's a black belt in kung fu. And I mean, listen, how transferable is kung fu to MMA? We don't see it all that often. I mean, the only guy that I can think... There's a lot of them out there. But the only guy that I can think of is Roy Nelson, always being billed as a kung fu fighter. But for our fighter out of Israel, he does have that in his back pocket. He made his debut on Contender Series up at a catchweight of 160 on incredibly short notice, where he wasn't favored to win that fight. And he goes in there and looks amazing. And he fought a fighter that was much bigger than him in Shaheen Santana, where in that fight I thought, okay, these guys look 2 weight classes apart. Levy was getting ready for a fight against Bruno Souza, your LFA featherweight champ. He's in the UFC now. He had a lackluster debut. However, that's what he was getting ready for. And this is a guy that, as an amateur, he was undefeated. The craziest part that I found was for, again, Natan, his first fight as a featherweight, June 2016. Pretty good. He wins that fight. Then he takes a fight in July 2016 at welterweight. It's been a lot of featherweights since. I just thought that was really crazy to throw out there. Again, striking with pinpoint accuracy, but the thing that we've seen is, okay, black belt in these 2 different disciplines, striking disciplines primarily, but in his fights, he takes guys down, and he really has a ton of success once the fight's on the mat, and he's always threatening for submissions. It's like an early Giga Chikadze when he fought Austin Springer.
No, I think that's actually a really good point. But what I think we'll both agree on is that he's a smart enough fighter to where I think he will at least fight to his strengths, especially in this matchup. Like, if he's going for takedowns early and they're not working, I think he will resort back to his striking on the back foot, because, let's be honest, that's how he's going to be able to win this fight. If Garcia's just crashing forward with sort of his hands up and not the greatest defensive stances, just sort of hoping that, hey, if the strikes hit off my arms, then great. If they hit me in the head, then I'll just sort of deal with it. That's what I'm going to really concerned about Garcia. I think Rafa can go out there and look really good for the first 4 or 5 minutes, kind of like he did against Grutzmacher. Maybe he can go out there and even take Levy down 1-2 times and make this look like it's going to be a really competitive fight. I just think that once Levy does start to get his timing down, and he might almost have to get taken down for him to get his timing down, if that makes any sense. It could look ugly until it looks good, but I do think that once both guys get settled into the matchup, I like Levy on all the in-betweens. I think he can strike for a higher level of volume, and I like his ability to get from point A to point B a lot better. Garcia will just throw a lot of volume, but he's going to miss a lot while he does it, and that's going to drain his gas tank. With Levy, he's not going to just sort of spray and pray. He'll aim and fire, the Israel Adesanya tweet or quote, and that's why I like Levy in this matchup.
For Levy, and he was originally scheduled to make his UFC debut against Austin Hubbard, so that's how highly the promotion thinks of him. He was forced out of that one one due to injury. I had to kind of drift my eyes a little bit lower on the page because I had to bring up my phone. You check us out at Fight Night Picks over on Instagram. I threw this one out there. This is a pick that's out there right now, live in the story. 190 total votes for Levy and 124 for Garcia. That's 61% going with Natan, Levy over on Fight Night Picks Instagram. Matt, the odds for this one, Garcia open a plus 130. He's a plus 100 right now. For Natan, open minus 150. He's minus 122 or thereabouts. So, Matt, the fans have Natan to get the win. The odds have him as well, but they're shrinking and closing. You kind of already tipped your hand, though.
I did, but I'm also going to warn everybody. Natan Levy's going to be like the maybe you shouldn't swipe right fighter on this card. Where it's like, hey, all the skills pop out. Everything looks really great. But when you meet him in person, he probably like reeks of cigarettes and like isn't interesting to talk to.
He's not Joe Schilling.
No, I know. I'm just saying with Levy, he does have one of those skill sets and one of those talents where when it goes bad, it's probably going to go really, really, really bad. And our commenters are going to get on us and say, oh, you guys thought this guy was going to be good in the first place? It happens. But I do trust his ability to beat Rafa Garcia. I think that if Chris Grutzmacher is able to push a pace and outstrike you, a guy like Levy should be able to do the same.
Watch out for the big time first round out of Rafa Garcia. And two, his last two wins, UFC level competition, Humberto Bandenay and Ghost Pepper Gonzalez. You know, the guy that got cold cocked by Jim Miller. Matt, both of us going with Israel's Natan Levy. And I think in this fight, might not want to wrestle or grapple with Rafa Garcia, but when it comes to the striking, look out for the body kick, the low kick, softening things up, and then going back up top. I like Levy in this fight. This should be an amazing one. This is a possible fight of the night, too. These two guys both bring it. I cannot wait for this fight. You're going to want to keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, and as we always say, let's get into it. Possible fight of the night coming up this weekend. We have Top Gun Tucker Lutz taking on a man with no nickname. You know him as Philly's own Pat Sabatini. And in this fight, a very interesting one because both of these guys have skill sets that complement each other. However, they have little differences, and that's what makes this one so much fun. And for Tucker Lutz, I figured, okay, he's got the nickname Top Gun. He probably likes Tom Cruise and maybe by extension Kenny Loggins. And then I went to the UFC Q&A that they have at the bottom of the fighter pages because sometimes you get weird, interesting nuggets of info. And for Lutz, he said that no, that nickname was given to him by his brother from the show Workaholics. So I don't know if he's ever even seen the movie. Honestly, I've watched bits and pieces. Maybe that's
pretty good.
Telling of me, if anything. And I didn't watch the Miles Teller one. But when I look at this fight, Matt, movie references aside, Sabatini's been able to do something really special since he ended up dislocating his elbow in that one fight with CFFC. Because this guy is tough AF. And it doesn't take just an elbow dislocation and a comeback not that much longer to tell you that. It's the fact that when he fought Jamal Emmers, he got rocked. Like, Herb Dean would have ended that fight, but that fight didn't get ended, and Jamal Emmers thought, okay, I'll play on the ground with Sabatini. And what happened was, he got caught in a little bit of a leg lock, and he thought it was good for a little bit. And that they were playing around. It was like watching WrestleMania with Shawn Michaels and Ric Flair. And listen, we're in a figure four, and somebody's going to give up with their family in attendance.
But remember, if you turn them upside down, it reverses the pain.
Well, it didn't for Jamal Emmers. It only torqued it even more. Sabatini clears the cobwebs, and he gets the win. And that's what I really like to see in that fight. His chin, I don't know so much. Emmers is a good fighter, though. Let's get that one out of the way, and hopefully he has a speedy recovery with his knee, because I really like watching Emmers fight. I get excited for his fights. Same thing can be said for Sabatini. I was a little leery of the level of competition coming into the UFC. I compared him to somewhat of a Charles Rosa coming in. Some people gave me some flack on that one because they said his striking was better than Rosa's, and his ground game was turned up a little bit. And listen, by and large, I would agree with that now. And I haven't said a lot, Matt, about Lutz. But for him, my big question mark was his level of competition coming into the UFC was bad. 59 and 52 was the combined opponent record coming in. And you look at that and you go, ooh, that's not good at all. So not so great that he ends up having to prove himself twice on Contender Series. Gets the win over Chase Gibson. He was a minus 470 in that fight. Gibson was 9 and 4. Comes back and fights Sherrard Blackledge. And in that fight, Sherrard was a favorite. And you come back with Tucker Lutz at plus 155. He wins that one by decision, forcing the hand of the UFC. They end up signing him. And in its debut, he takes on Angel of Death! Kevin Aguilar. And he wins that fight, and he looked good. Now, Aguilar rallied back in the third round because he was fighting for his life and his job, and he still ended up losing the fight. But for Lutz, he proved some things to me, especially in that fight, too.
Exactly, and this is a really interesting fight because I think both guys have a pretty high ceiling leaving this fight. Whoever wins this, I think, listen, they're not going to be at the doorsteps of the rankings yet, but I think the winner of this, within the next 8 or 9 months, could definitely expect a number next to their name.
You're going to be fighting Lerone Murphy.
Honestly, yeah, like those are the types of matchups that you can probably expect moving forward. Because for Pat Sabatini, it's been an interesting run, and I think we should get this out of the way. Normally when we make these types of claims about fighters, and you haven't signed off on this, so I won't put words in your mouth. I think Pat Sabatini can be a top 15 fighter in the future, but it's been interesting. It's not like he's had a flawless path through the UFC. Like, the Tristan Connolly fight was pretty close, if we're being honest. Connolly had a huge weight cut. No one really knew what version of him we were going to see, and he held his own against a really, really dynamic prospect in Sabatini. So it didn't get rid of all the shine and the allure of Sabatini for me, but it was something that I kept in the back of my mind. I thought about it, okay, maybe he isn't that uber prospect I thought he was, but what he showed against Jamal Emmers is, hey, I can make good decisions when I'm hurt, and that's something not a lot of fighters do. Like, Kevin Lee can't do that, and he's fought for a UFC title. Maybe not the best example I could have gone for, but still, you get the idea. Sabatini was able to at least show a skill and a technique that fighters in the top 5 and in the top 10 of most divisions don't even have. He can clear the cobwebs and still be offensive in a round that he gets hurt in, and that's something that's really important because some losses mean more than others, and some wins mean more than others too. And the level of competition was really good in his last fight with Jamal Emmers, because like you said, I agree 100%. Emmers might not have the greatest run if you just want to look at his resume, but talent-wise, he's a very talented fighter. And if you could beat Jamal Emmers, it leaves a pretty good window open to beating a guy like Tucker Lutz, who fights in a very similar way to Emmers. He's going to throw big power, at least early in the fight. He's going to throw a lot of volume. He can wrestle. It's just when you're wrestling a guy like Sabatini, it's really interesting. He's one of those guys who, if he's on top, he won't immediately go for submissions. He'll really make you pay. He's got good ground and pound from the top position. But when he's on bottom, you've always got to worry because he's not afraid to just throw crazy stuff up off his back. He's not just going to sit back with a full guard and wait for the ref to stand him back up.
I mean, in terms of pure grappling perspective, and I made a giant mistake last week, and I said, listen, practicing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, Thiago Moises. Moises is so much better at Jiu-Jitsu. We didn't get to see any of that. Joel Alvarez decided, I'm just going to dedicate myself to becoming a kickboxer, and he looked amazing in that fight. But when it comes to this one, on paper at least, Sabatini's got those credentials. He is so good on the ground. Lutz is no slouch, and that's where he butters his bread. And if you really do look at it, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu purple belt, trains at Team Ground Control in Maryland. If you want a party favor, if you're sitting down on the couch, this is the point of Fight Night Picks. I want you to enjoy the fights, and I want you to one-up your friends and have little nuggets of information. So when these fights are going on, you can say, hey, did you know that Tucker Lutz's dad owned a sod farm? That's pretty cool. Did you know that Tucker Lutz used to be an HVAC install technician before he became a full-time pro MMA fighter? No, I didn't know that. Tell your buddies that and see what they say. They're probably going to look at you with 4 eyes and tell you to get out and take the beer with you. That's how much they're not going to like you. But Matt, when I look at this one, we talk about buttering bread with a ground game. Pat Sabatini's a butter salesman in this one, and listen, the prices are extremely low, and everybody's buying it.
I work at a restaurant, Craig, and I've never met a butter salesman in my life, but I like the example nonetheless. I kind of tipped my hand early because I truly believe Sabatini has that ranked future in his sights. He's been able to show some, I guess, just really advanced stages or advanced techniques for someone so young in his UFC career. Now, I do worry about him against guys on the feet, especially in this division. You brought up a name earlier, and someone like Giga Chikadze, who they've got really good distance on their strikes. They can hit you from very far away, and they make your entries on takedowns very difficult. Those are the types of strikers, the type of matchups that I think Sabatini's going to have trouble with, but I don't think Lutz can go out there and fight with that kind of a game plan.
And I mean, let's give it to Lutz, because if you look at the 5-on-in, knockout win over Cole Presley, knockout win over Trevor Thompson, the last 3 wins are all by decision, but this is a guy that throws with a lot of power, and he's got a squared off stance to where he can really support his base and throw that power. So look out for that from Lutz, especially if you do like him in this fighter. Maybe you're so far sold on Sabatini that you come back in and you really appreciate what Lutz does very, very well. He's a guy that can accumulate a lot of ground time too when things are working out in his favor. The odds for this one, Lutz open to plus 130s, plus 121. Sabatini open to minus 150. Roughly there, minus 149. That's the average that best fight odds have. Matt, the Topology votes on this one surprised us. They are to you. I'm going to say over under 65% Sabatini.
I think they'll be over. I think he's a big favorite. Barely.
Not so much. 756 total votes, 72% Sabatini, 58% by decision, 28% by submission. For the 28% that have Lutz, 76% by decision, and 18% saw the way that Sabatini handled getting hit by Jamal Emmers, and they've got Tucker Lutz to win by knockout. I have Sabatini in this fight ever so slightly, but this is a volatile one coming up.
And Lutz has a chance to really, he's going up a ladder in this game of snakes and ladders in the division, because right now Sabatini is seen as one of those exciting prospects who is only 1 or 2 fights away from getting some of those bigger names. So let's say Lutz is able to go out there, get a big uppercut, knock Sabatini out, then he himself should be knocking on the door of them rankings. But I still like Sabatini.
Big time fight coming up this weekend. Both of us going with Pat Sabatini to get the win, but you let us know down below. Are we wrong? Are we off? Is a Top Gunner going to get the win? And Tucker Lutz, you let us know what you're thinking down below. Make sure you check us out on Apple Podcasts as well as Spotify. You can check out all of these episodes, full-length ones, episodes of Early Stoppage over there as well. We would certainly appreciate that. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it. This holiday season, I'm giving thanks to our friends at Manscaped. Do I tell my extended family that I have the Performance Package 4.0 from the global leaders in below-the-waist grooming? Not to mention, it includes the Lawnmower 4.0. If you're watching on video, you know that I have the Lawnmower 4.0 stashed away in the shed. There it is. Boom. And look at that. There's that 4000K LED light that you know and love. Listen, that trimmer, I use it to tame my bush and score brownie points with the in-laws. Which is actually true. They wrote that, but listen, the in-laws actually like Manscaped. Gift yourself Manscaped, or listen, the man in your life who needs it, join the 4 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped with 20% off and free shipping with the code FNP by going to manscaped.com. Matt, this is a holiday season, and if you're an American, you have Thanksgiving coming up. If you're a Canadian, you're sitting here shaking your heads going, boys, why are you reading Thanksgiving copy? You're Canadians. Listen, I get it. But I like our friends south of the border a lot. I miss them. I haven't been over there since February 2020. And what I have to say about all of this, Matt, is the fact that I've talked a lot about the Lawnmower 4.0, but last week you opened a box for me. And inside of that box, there were some new goodies from Manscaped. The Daily Shower Gel Body Wash from Manscaped. And listen, I opened it. We got the 2-in-1 conditioner, shampoo and conditioner, cleansing and revitalizing hair wash and conditioner. I have this to say about it. I opened it, and once I popped the top, I went, that smells like that Manscaped cologne. And then I read it, and it says Ultra Premium, Cologne Fragrance Refined. And it's subtle, and that's what I like about it. So, if you're over on the website, you're already checking out the Performance Package 4.0, you've got the Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer. Now, again, I can talk about this for days, but Ceramic Edge is great. I mean, less... worry when you're trying to shave around, your valuables. But the nice thing about it, you can pop the top off, you can clean out in and around the motor, grease it if you need to. Matt, the biggest problem that I have with grooming, it's not on my face, it's attached to my face, and it's not down below. Well, that would be weird. That's not good. But the Weed Whacker. Now, everybody knows this. 360-degree motor. You've heard me weekend.
Get in there.
Get in there! All right, don't steal that from a popular podcaster, but what I will say is make sure you check out their website. You're going to use the promo code FNP over there. You're going to get 20% off and free shipping with code FNP at manscaped.com. That's 20% off and free shipping with code FNP at manscaped.com. Be thankful this holiday season for the best gift of all from Manscaped. Your balls will thank you. Matt, Manscaped's been around for what's been almost a calendar year.
Exactly.
We're riding out 2020 on a high with Fight Night Picks and with Manscaped. Matt, I really do like the shampoo and conditioner from the crew over there. So if you're perusing, if you're going to get yourself a Performance Package 4.0 that comes with a shed travel bag and the boxers, maybe you add the shampoo and conditioner to your cart.
Maybe you've been growing your hair out along with me during this journey of a channel, and this is the type of stuff that you need if you've been doing that. But like you said, we've been using Manscaped products for basically a year now, and they've never done me wrong in that time, so I really can't say anything negatively.
All right, make sure you check them out. Again, code FNP, manscaped.com. 20% off and free shipping. Big fights coming up on this main card that you're not going to want to miss. So as we always say with Fight Night Picks, let's get into it. Possible fight of the night coming up this weekend. We have Davey, who could still be in the Navy, Grant, taking on a man with no nickname, representing Metro Boomin' Metro Fight Club, Adrian Yanez. You talk about two primary strikers that can definitely get it done. Davey Grant taking on Yanez should be an amazing fight. And I think if this one hits the mat, you got to look out for Davey Grant because that guy is slick, really, no matter where the fight goes. But if you've paid attention to Davey in his last number of fights, the 3-fight win streak that he had over Grigory Popov, little bit of a layoff, takes on Martin Day, knocks him out where he's an underdog. Then he takes on Jonathan Martinez and ruins Matt Allen's hopes and dreams in that fight. Grant was on a heater of a run. Had a fairly competitive fight his last time out against Marlon Vera, but in the rematch there, it just wasn't so. And normally the guy that wins the first fight wins the second fight, but not so much in that one. And look at the great things that Vera's been able to go on and do since then, namely poor old Frankie Edgar. Now, Matt, when we look at this fight, both of these guys are in weird stages of their careers because for Grant, he had this late career resurgence, but not a lot of miles on the tank. He's, about a month away from being 36 at 135 pounds? Like, that stuff doesn't really compute with a lot of people. Look at bantamweight right now. Yeah, Jose Aldo, again, all-time featherweight. He's the best featherweight of all time. And then there's also Frankie Edgar, but he's lost his last couple. And then who else is there? Dominic Cruz, but there's still...
Pedro Munoz is old.
Those guys are legends, and Pedro Munoz is something. So Davey Grant is just a weird anomaly in this division. And then there's Adrian Yanez. He's like, I don't know, sitting there, you're hanging out with your family, you're wondering, geez, I got a turntable. What record should I put on? What's something that could please everybody? If I showed somebody a fighter, what would please them all? Matt, I have something for you. Jolly Christmas from Frank Sinatra. You put this one on, you're just going to be moving to the music, you're going to be enjoying it. And the best part about an Adrian Yanez fight is, typically he wins. His last time out, though, it was a little bit less Frank Sinatra. It was more Sinatra Jr. And he almost really had it all undone after a bad first round, where Randy Costa pushed a great pace and had him in a lot of trouble after that first one.
He did, but I'm going to disagree with you a little bit. He never had Yanez in trouble of, being finished. He hurt him with the jab, and he busted up his nose, but he never rocked him, and he never stunned him. It was just a lot of volume on the part of Costa in that matchup. But that's the thing I keep on going back to. Davey Grant hits very, very hard. He's got that old man strength as his, Hall of Fame X Factor. But he's not the fastest striker in the world. And I know Craig rolls his eyes every time I say this, but speed kills on the street and in the cage. And that's the thing I keep on going back to. Davey Grant has really good kicks, and he doesn't get the credit for them, but he really uses his kicks on the outside because he doesn't throw a jab. That's sort of his way of just staying active and staying busy on the outside of his range. He gets the primary of his striking damage done with his hands and with his boxing on the inside. But I keep on going back to the fact that his punches are moving through mud when he throws them. Now, when they land, they have devastating effects on them. Look at what happened to Jonathan Martinez. That left hook was a thing of beauty that flattens him. I just don't think those techniques are going to be open against a guy like Yanez, who's so crisp with his boxing technique. The thing with Martinez is he a great striker? Of course he is. But he implements the kick quite a bit more, and he needs the leg kick and his own body kick to really start getting his own attack off. Where what Grant was able to do in that matchup was get on the inside of his kicking distance and use his own boxing, his own power to really wear on Jonathan Martinez. I don't think that's going to be a good path to victory against a guy like Yanez, because every time you get on the inside, Yanez is the much faster guy, and he's got the better hand power too. So I just don't really know. How is Davey Grant going to win the big moments in this fight? I think he's going to have to rely on his wrestling more than we've seen in the past few fights at least, and it'll be really interesting to see if that works, because the one matchup we've seen him use his wrestling in recent memory was the Marlon Vera one his last time out, and he did start to fatigue later on in that fight. So I think for Grant, does he have bad cardio? Not by any means. I don't think he's in that boat. But I think he's kind of like what Justin Gaethje says. Justin Gaethje says, hey, the reason I don't wrestle is because it makes me tired. It's the most draining part of my MMA game. Davey Grant's kind of in that same boat. Can he grapple? Yes. But I worry about him grappling early on in this fight, because let's say he does burn his arms out going for a lot of takedowns early. I don't think he's going to be able to stand up to the power and the punching combinations of Yanez later on if he isn't able to either A, get an offensive takedown, or B, just intelligently defend himself up against the cage.
So if Davey Grant is at 135, what Justin Gaethje is at 155, Justin Gaethje is probably the greatest all-action fighter in combat sports. Yeah. We talked about that on last week's episode of Early Stoppage. You should check it out. It's here on the channel. But is Davey Grant the greatest all-action fighter at 135?
He's on a short list, maybe? No, but here's the thing about Davey Grant. Yes, we say Davey from the Navy. Yes, he's 36 years old at bantamweight, but like, he's got more tread on the tires than you would imagine. I compare him more to like Jimmy Butler than anybody else. Like Butler's a little bit older, he plays really hard, but he's still pretty good for his age, and that's the thing with Grant. You can't just judge him based on his age of being 35 years old. You have to judge him based on how many fights he's had. He's only had 16 professional fights, which makes him sort of young for how old he really is.
So if you look at it in terms of the odds for this one, Yanez open a minus 240 favorite, minus 263 right now. Grant opened a plus 205. He's plus 208 roughly. If we have a look at the Tapology votes, surprise to us, there to you. Man, I'm going to set the over-under high. I'm going to say over-under 80% Yanez.
I think it's over.
Ah, look at that. 857 total votes, 89% Yanez, 20% by decision, 72% by knockout. For the 11% that have Grant, 43% by decision, 40% by knockout. I would save this one until the first round ends because for Davey Grant, he relies a lot on pressure, unorthodox techniques, and power to really start to pull away and win fights. He talked about it. When the fight's at distance, he's got whipping leg kicks. When it gets in tight, he's got great dirty boxing. He's got a wicked left hook. He has so many different things that he can throw at you. Yanez, nice high stance, walks you down, boxes you up. Sometimes he throws wild head kicks and beats Victor Rodriguez. Sometimes he goes out there against a somewhat green Randy Costa, who he's got a very high ceiling. You lose to Yanez, you don't lose a ton of stock, especially having won that first round handily. But in a fight like this, I want to see it again. Okay, first round against Grant. What's Grant's game plan? Are we going to work the takedowns? Are we going to fight a little bit like Miles Johns when those guys fought? When Johns fought Yanez back in LFA? That's a fight I'd love to see again, but never will. So in this fight, I've got Yanez by an ever so slight margin, but it's not the most confident pick, seeing as how Grant is so well-rounded. I don't think he's going to dip into the wrestling early, but if he does, and if he's able to win the first round, I might consider it a little bit differently.
So the weird thing about Yanez is his career has a lot more similarities to the one of Jorge Masvidal than just his appearance. Like, the way you beat Yanez is he can sort of get, I don't want to say overconfident because I don't think that's the case. But if he gets off to a lead early, he can kind of settle into the fight and let his opponent work his way back in. Domingo Pilarte is not a better fight than Adrian Yanez whatsoever. Like, he's not a better fighter than him. But he has a win over him, and it was just because he was a lot more steady throughout their fight. I think the way to beat Yanez is if you are able to put on that type of a Costa gas tank or Costa output early on in the fight. The problem is Costa proved it. It's really hard to keep that kind of a pace up for a solid 15 minutes if you're outside of the top 15. So until Yanez is fighting like the Marlon Veras of the world, the Sean O'Malley's of the world, I'm going to like him against most other primary strikers in this division, and that's why I like Yanez.
Both of us going with Adrian Yanez, but you make up your mind for yourself on this one. You let us know down below in the comment section who you have, because this is a big time fight of the night style matchup at bantamweight. Absolutely love it. Big time main card left. I mean, look, Joanne Wood, Tyler Santos, who else? Sean Brady, Michael Chiesa. You're not going to want to miss it. Keep locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it. Big fight coming up this weekend. We have Syndicate MMA's own Joanne Wood taking on Tyler Santos. There might be a head scratch. There might be some confusion. She got married to John Wood recently. Dropped the Calder. There's the story.
Congrats.
She's got a fight coming up this weekend. And listen, I'll let the cat out of the bag right now. She's a giant underdog in this fight. And Matt, my question is, because I think it's halfway silly, Tyler Santos starts off her UFC career and she loses a fight against somebody who's no longer in the UFC anymore by split decision, that being Italy's own Mara Romero Barella. She goes on to beat Molly McCann in what made us look like the biggest dum-dums in the entire world. She beats Jillian Robertson. She beats Roxanne Modafferi. Those wins, decision. For Tyler Santos to be favored this heavily in a perennial contender, be it at 115 or 125, what has Tyler Santos changed since that fight against Mara Romero Barella? Or could you just chalk it up to maybe even jitters?
Because the players want to play. And the haters going to hate.
Does she own that again?
Tyler Santos is going to shake. Shake it off. She's one of those fighters who had a very, very poor performance in her UFC debut. And hey, I may have even had a market correction, if you will, and thought, hey, She's just not the fighter I thought she was. Bit of a patent record coming into the UFC. Maybe I was sold a false bill of goods. Not the case whatsoever for Santos. And I guess my way to answer your question is, I think it was Octagon jitters in her UFC debut. It was sort of an uncharacteristic lack of output, which really lost her that fight against Barella. Now, that hasn't been the case whatsoever ever since then. And the great thing that I have to say about Taila Santos is, we always make the jokes about, JSP, about, oh, he lost to Joe Lozon, I held that against him, but I moved past it now. There's some fighters who, hey, those losses still stay in the back of my mind, no matter how much I say, oh, I moved past it. Taila has done everything humanly possible to get that debut out of my mind, because she's really shown that she is more than just one of those kind of hesitant strikers, if you want to call her, because that's sort of what she was in her debut. And now she's the one marching down her opposition, and it's really, really refreshing to see, especially in her last fight against Roxanne, because, hey, I know Modafferi, she's near the end of her career, she's been around forever, she's fought everybody on the world.
Going for her 50th fight and then riding off into the sunset. Happy trails.
But Roxanne has as much experience as any other MMA fighter really does in the world. And if you have a hole in your game, she is going to expose it. And I thought, hey, if Santos is going to lose one of those, kind of like what we mentioned earlier, one of those Sabina Mazow, Alexis Davis matchups, that could be Taila Santos. What she did to Roxanne Modafferi was awful. It shouldn't be allowed in the cage. She proved that, hey, Roxanne kind of is near the end of her career and Santos is the future, because not only did she have success on the feet like we knew she was going to be able to, she was getting takedowns, she was passing the guard. It was one of those flawless performances that we were just kind of waiting to see out of Taila Santos.
Career-wise, Roxanne Modafferi, 25% takedown defense. Not great, but Santos went 5 of 5 for takedowns. She had a knockdown in that fight, in her fight against Molly McCann. What does Meatball do well? She can box, but she can wrestle a little bit, or she does. She just offensively wrestles. In that fight, 5 of 7 for her takedown attempts, 7 minutes, 53 seconds of control time. She outstrikes her. And then in her fight against Jillian Robertson, well, that one wasn't really close. And what did Taila do? She just grappled the whole time and held Jillian Robertson down and pretty much demoralized her in that fight. So when you look at this matchup against Joanne, the artist formerly known as Calderwood, I look at this, 63% takedown defense for Wood. Let's focus on some fights where she got taken down. Well, Lauren Murphy took her down. Jessica I took her down. Those are recent ones.
She gets held down, though, is my big issue with Wood.
Which is true, and the one spot where she's really, really good at, and this is what I'm eager to see. I mean, what is it Dr. Knievel? Are we still going with that one?
I think so.
Is that still a thing? I know JoJo's out there. But the thing about her is her best position when we're in clinch. The elbows, the knees, everything that she can throw with vicious intent. There's so many great things to like out of Joanne Calderwood. That's what makes this matchup so much fun. Because for Santos, she's been winning overwhelmingly in her last 3 fights. 100%. She's looked great. Hasn't finished anybody, but that's a tall task against those 3 opponents. You look at it for Joanne Wood, good competition, the best competition. You lose some by split decision. Like, one judge had her beating Lauren Murphy, which would have had her fight Valentina Shevchenko. Like, that's how close these fights are. So, I have a tough time with this one going, okay, I have this prospect that I wasn't sold on before, but she's looked amazing in her last 3 fights against decent competition. A great gatekeeper who's near the end of her career, a decent prospect that's been around, I guess a decent fighter that's been around, Molly McCann, and it's a weird bucket of muscles, if you will. I just have a hard time, I gotta be honest.
I definitely think Joanne Wood is like 20% better than the public's opinion of her, and this is what I'll even have to say about her. A perfect Joanne Wood fight still probably results in her winning by a split decision. You know what I mean? Like, if Joanne Wood has everything going right in her fights. I was listening to a podcast. It's the Low Post podcast by Zach Lowe. It's on ESPN. It's about basketball. And he was really high on Scotty Barnes for the Raptors, because what he said was they were developing him. They were doing a workout. And this psychologist did a workout. And they said, okay, I want you to imagine you scoring 25 points. Just like, think about how you would do that in a game setting. For Joanne Wood, for her thinking about, okay, like, what would be my perfect fight? I still see a lot of 50-50 exchanges where it's not really like she's pulling all that far ahead from her opponent. And that's my big issue with this fight. If Joanne Wood has everything going her way, it's still going to be a lot of 50-50 positions where she might land an elbow, but Santos might land 2 rabbit punches on the inside, which is going to be somewhat equal in the judge's mind. If Wood starts throwing a lot of knees at the middle, if she does get that clinch position, I think she's going to get taken down, rinse and repeat over and over based off of them. And my big problem with Wood is, you brought up the numbers. She does have pretty good takedown defense, but she's one of these fighters who, she's got a good initial move. She has a good initial move off of her back, but she's shown a lack of grappling IQ on the mat in the past, and I think that's going to get her caught against someone like Santos.
The thing that scares me away from this one, and if anybody tells you that these odds are great, they're not. They're baked. Tyler Santos open a minus 180 favorite, which to me is respectable, and I would have assumed it would have stayed there. Minus 318 favorite on best fight odds today, Monday. If you look at it for Wood, open plus 155. She's plus 248. Topology votes surprised us. They are to you. Let's have a look at them. 822 total votes, 75% Santos, 81% by decision. For the 25% that have Wood, 85% by decision. I definitely like that one more, but I'm sure those odds are baked too. You know what? We're doing a show, Matt. Let's have a little bit of fun. I'll find those odds for us, but for me, again, over-under at 2.5 rounds. The over is minus 325. So this is just to sit back, watch it, and if Santos wins, you give her Jennifer Maia. If Joanne Wood wins, you give her Jennifer Maia again. Like, that's the thing. I don't know who you really match her up with, even if she beats Santos. It's a lot easier to matchmake for the prospect than it is for the established veteran in this case, in an oddly dynamic division that's not up at the top. Maybe a booker with Jessica Andrade?
No!
Again. But you have to.
I know, you're right. This is the problem with both of the... Like, I won't say, okay, women's strawweight is as good as any division in the UFC. It really is top to bottom. There's a lot of depth. Bantamweight and flyweight are both in these awful positions where they have a number one contender who's head and shoulders above everybody else in the division, and Jessica Andrade and Germaine Durden. And then the champion just so happens to be like a historically great, all-time Mount Rushmore type of a talent. So that's why it is so hard matchmaking both these ladies moving forward, because Santos probably is deserving of a title shot at some point. It's just really hard to sort of figure out what her path in that direction is.
All right, Matt. So both of us in this fight going with Tyler Santos, but not at minus 300 confidence.
No.
So just sit back, watch this fight, enjoy it. If you do watch it, it should be pretty good. I'm looking forward to it, and the rest of this main card that you're not going to want to miss. So keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it. Absolute banger coming up this weekend at Bantamweight. One of my favorite guys to watch in all of MMA. You know him as the man, Rani Yahya. This is a guy from Team Constrictor. He's an ADCC champ. He's a 4th degree Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. This guy, when he takes a neck, an arm, a leg home, it's gone. This is a guy that fought Mike Brown in the UFC. He's been around forever. And for Kyung Ho Kong out of South Korea, I equally think as high of him as I do of Rani Yahya. And the reason why is because for Kong, he's such a fun fighter to watch. He's got exciting stand-up. He's got great submission abilities. If he gets taken down, he gets back up to his feet. He's such a fun guy to watch coming out of Team Mad over in Busan. Matt, this is a fight that was originally supposed to take place a number of months ago. We covered it extensively. Let's throw it on back to that original video. Update as to why it's taking place in November. Give you the new odds and give you a pick on this one. Absolutely love this fight, and shouts to Max Friedman over on Twitter. He knew as soon as this one was announced to at me at Craig Allen FNP. But Matt, we have a couple of my guys. Kyung Ho Kong is going to be taking on Rani Yahya. And if you can't feel the excitement through the screen, I have no better way to share it. Like, do you want my microphone? Do you want my shirt? Do you want my blood? I don't know what to tell you. I absolutely love this fight. Kyung Ho Kong, he's a guy that I've been excited about for a really long time. He's on a 3-fight win streak. Teruto Ishihara, you've got a big win against Liu Pingyuang his last time, and that one was by split. And before that, a split against Brandon Davis. But Kyung Ho Kong, he's like a Swiss Army knife. He's just kind of good everywhere. He can mix in his striking. He's a really tricky guy to try and figure out on the feet. And just when you think you've got him figured out, like Guido Canetti, well, he's just going to whip out one of the craziest takedowns you've ever seen. He's going to submit you. This guy is, and I say it again, a Swiss Army knife. And you look at it, I mean, big wins over fighters from Japan in the UFC. Sunichi Shimizu, Mishinori Tanaka, and Teruto Ishihara. You look at it, his debut was back in 2013 against Alex Caceres. He fought Chico Camus. He fought Ricardo Ramos. That was back in 2018. Had a lengthy layoff from 2014 to 2018. Mandatory military service over in Korea. But man, I'm so glad we have my guy, Mr. Perfect, Kyung Ho Kong, back in the UFC, because he's one of those guys that I feel like if he fought more often, he'd be like a more well-known fighter. I know that sounds stupid as I say it, but I wouldn't bridge on fan favorite. But listen, when I'm talking fan favorite, if you don't know my guy, Ronnie Yahya, by now, where have you been? Like, straight up, where have you been? This guy's coming into this fight at 36. He's almost 37. He's fought a litany of fighters. He has a fight against Chad Mendes. His UFC debut was at UFC Fight Night 23 against Mike Brown back in 2011. He has a win over Eddie Wineland with WEC. You remember how Eddie Wineland was the WEC bantamweight champ? Ronnie Yahya beat him with WEC. He fought Kid Yamamoto and got knocked out by soccer kicks because that happened in K1. But other than that, really special fighter. First round rear naked choke win at WC 28 over one Mark Hominick, Canadian legend. I can go on and on about Ronnie Yahya. He's one of the more accredited jiu-jitsu players in MMA. Obviously, you have the Damian Maias, you have the Rodolfo Vieiras. Ronnie Yahya cannot be denied. Matt, I think the craziest stat of all, this guy has 27 wins. 21 of them are by submission, all different types as well. North-south choke over John Hosman. You look at it in the UFC, he had a headbutt against Johnny Bedford. So what does he do? He comes out and Kimuras him the next time out. Such a special fighter. Also beat Mishinori Tanaka in the UFC. And his last time out, he beat Ray Rodriguez earlier this year and submitted him. So my guy, Ronnie Yahya, still doing it. He kind of walks in like a what's that Pop Smoke song? Like a thief in the night? Like a thief on the night. Like a thief in the night? Like a thief on the night. Like a thief in the night? Creepy guy. But Matt, this guy's a special fighter.
He's the stiffest thief you've ever seen. Like when I think of a thief in the night, I think of someone, with some fluidity to their movement. Ronnie's got none of that. Like the before and after pictures on most chiropractic commercials, Ronnie moves like the before. And then they crack his back, and then he moves like someone who could be considered a thief in the night, perhaps. But Ronnie is weird because every Ronnie Yahya fight is like, hey, I feel like the opposing corner just slaps the fighter in the face, and they go, hey, don't let him get that head and arm position. And the fighter goes, great, I'm not going to let Ronnie Yahya get that head and arm position. And then at some point, I'm going to guess in the second, maybe even the third round, Ronnie Yahya finds himself in top position in like a head and arm choke, and he ends up winning. He's just crafty on the mat that way. And Ronnie Yahya is in that kind of, he's like 70% of Ryan Hall, where he's not going to openly go for guard, like pull guard 12 times in a row, but he will pull guard. He is not afraid to do it in modern MMA, which is very much a lost art when you speak about things that used to be in MMA a lot that now you don't really see all that often. Ronnie is not afraid to pull guard. The other thing about Ronnie Yahya, though, that we have just sort of glanced over, his cardio is terrible nowadays. Like, he moves like a 37-year-old Brazilian man would. And hey, there's no shame against that, but he's had 38 fights in his career. You're gonna start accumulating damage at a certain point, and he is one of those fighters where it really comes down to, can Ronnie submit his opponent before the end of the second round, or is he gonna try to survive that third round? Because a lot of the time it does come down to him just trying to survive that last 5 minutes and not really fighting to win, but fighting not to lose. And I know that leaves a sour taste in a lot of people's mouths because it might not be the most fan-friendly style, but it's obviously hooked Craig Allen of Fight Night Picks, and that should really be all you need to know about Ronnie Yahya's fighting style. What I will say is that Yahya, at least as of late, has been in there with guys who have terrible submission defense, and it has made his skill set maybe look a little bit better than I think it truly is. Like, if you're going to beat Luke Saunders, how are you going to beat him? Well, you're probably going to heel hook him. If you're going to beat Russell Stone, how are you going to beat him? Well, you're probably going to submit him. Like, there's just, Ray Rodriguez has like 15 losses and 13 of them are by submission. Like, Ronnie Yahya has been in there with some guys who are susceptible to the submission. I'm not saying he's not phenomenal on the mat, but I don't think Ronnie Yahya is the type of guy who can go out there and out-grapple a guy like Ryan Hall. I do put his grappling like maybe a tad bit underneath the top tier grapplers of this division, and this is the reason why. He doesn't really have the wrestling to go along with his jiu-jitsu. Ronnie Yahya is one of those guys who, if he just had like a power double, like, he'd be that much more effective because a lot of his energy is spent trying to get his opponent to the mat. And then by the time he gets them down, he's only got like 30% of his energy to then try to go get a submission. For Hung-Yo Kong, if he can just keep this fight on the outside and again, use the space in between him and Ronnie as his takedown defense, I really do feel like he can just start accumulating not record-breaking levels of volume, but he can definitely go out there and out-volume Ronnie Yahya on the feet for 15 minutes.
Ronnie Yaya got COVID. So ultimately, the first fight, that one was canceled. Now we end up here months and months later. And for Ronnie, he's an Instagram model for sauna suits. And I'm going to put that picture right up there.
Why wouldn't he be?
But for Kyung Ho Gong, he's just an Instagram model, period. I mean, go look at his Instagram. It's weird.
He grew with the salad.
He did grow the salad out, the dirty, dirty fruit salad in the back. But for Gong, he's Mr. Perfect with his hair and what he does in the cage. For Ronnie, listen, that guy might walk around like the miles have caught up to him, but once he starts rolling down the road, it's like an old jalopy. It's like, look at that guy, that Oldsmobile. Man, that looks awful. And then he pulls up to a stoplight, puts his foot to the floor. Wow, it purrs. So for Ronnie Yaya, when he's fighting guys like Ray Rodriguez, submitting them, it's easy stuff. When he's fighting Enrique Barzola, it's a little close. When he's fighting Ricky Simone, it's not as close. But when he's fighting Luke Sanders, Russell Doan, big Russell Doan.
He wasn't good.
Russell Doan, 3 years, 8 months ago. But Ronnie Yaya, he's been around forever, and his jiu-jitsu is some of the best in all of MMA.
Yeah, like, you don't even want to mess with Ronnie on the mat. You don't, because he has that one-shot, one-kill type of jiu-jitsu that you do not want to mess around with, even for a second. And that's why a lot of the guys who do end up beating him are just so good at wrestling that they don't really have to entertain any of those grappling situations in the first place. Like, that's exactly what Ricky Simone did. Ricky Simone, who's a good but not great striker. We've seen him get outstruck by the other top-tier guys in the division, but we know him for his great offensive and defensive wrestling. But Simone decided, hey, I'm going to fight like Chuck Liddell all of a sudden. I'm just going to use my wrestling in a defensive setting, and I'm going to force Yaya to become a striker. Now, for Simone, it was able to work, and he looked really good in that fight. But that really is the key when you're fighting a guy like Ronnie. You don't have to defend submissions if you don't get put in them in the first place, and that's always the key when you're fighting him. Now, this is a really, really interesting fight because for Kyung Ho Kong, a lot of his wins are by submission. If you look, he's a phenomenal grappler himself. But the difference is the way that these guys get their submissions. Kong's a guy who will hit you, drop you, get some ground and pound, soften you up a little bit, and then look for the submission that way. It's a lot less of, oh, I get the single leg to the mat, I get side control, you give me a bad position, and then we start scrambling for submissions. For Kong, it is a lot more of that, oh, I hurt you on the feet, and then I'll finish you with the submission. And that's why this fight's going to be really interesting, because Ronnie's one of the worst strikers in the UFC. Here's the thing. Now, when you're as good at grappling as he is, you can get away with it, but there's always two things you have to think about when you break down a Ronnie Yaya fight, and even you, his biggest believer, will have to agree with this. He rarely wins third rounds. Rarely. And his striking defense isn't very good. So for me, I always wonder at what stage of his career is he at to where his durability is going to go, because he's someone who can rely on his chin a little bit. He can take a shot to close distance, but I don't think this is the matchup you really want to be risking that in.
You're telling me a guy that's 3 weeks away from being 37 of bantamweight's going to start to slow down at some point?
I know, it's surprising.
And for Kyung Ho Gong, it's a shame that, listen, we lost a little bit of his prime because the guy's just turned 34. I mean, looking like a dime on the IG, like I said. But if you want to see his best performance, when he fought Diego Rivas, what was it? That was like the February. Was that Jeremy Stevens, Josh Emmett? Was it that card?
It was a while ago, yeah.
It was gross. But in that fight for Kong, like, who was it? Paddy Pimblett, Manikivi? Was that who it was? Who did he fight over with Cage Warriors? Flying Triangle. Either way.
I just think Jimmy Flick Cody Durden now.
Wild finish in that one. Gong had one of those crazy finishes in that fight. Alexis Savitas, that's who it was.
There we go.
But for Kyung Ho Gong, I think he's a much better striker than Ronnie Yaya. I think he's got good enough defensive hips so that he doesn't have to worry about getting taken down as much. Career 71% takedown defense. He's got a fight of the night split decision win over Tanaka back years ago. The Kennedy win. Lost to Ricardo Ramos by split decision. Beats Teruto Ishihara. Beats Brandon Davis. Beats Liu Pingyuan. Both of those two last ones by split decision. Cardio King and Liu Pingyuan. Where is he at? Because he's a fun fighter to watch. But Ronnie Yaya, like we said time and again, he's been around forever. The odds are at par on this fight right now. If you have strong feelings either way, let us know down below in the comments section. Wow. Over on Tapology, not strong feelings, but they are. 788 total votes, 62% Yaya, 64% by decision. For the 38% that have Gong, 68% by jumpins. Decision, 18% by knockout. Matt, at this point in the show, I'm having a hard time containing my excitement.
I got a spicy take.
Because I love this fight. I just can't take poor Ronnie here.
I think Chung Ho Kong's going to win by third round stoppage, too. I think he's going to knock him out, to be completely honest with you. Because this is the thing about Yaya. I forget what other fighter you had brought this up about, but you said in the first round his hands start by his chest, which already isn't a great thing. And by the third round, they're by his waist. That's my thing with Ronnie. I can't even trust him in that first round to at least stay sound defensively before fatigue sets in. And that's what I think Kong's going to just be able to get off to such a big lead that's going to force Yaya. Kind of similar to the Ricky Simone fight where he's shooting those desperation takedowns from halfway across the cage. And those are never the fights you want to see Ronnie Yaya involved in. So I like Chung Ho Kong quite a bit.
Ronnie also has a fight against Mishinori Tanaka. He won by decision. Then he lost to Joe Soto by decision, who was in one of the craziest title fights of all time in the UFC. But Matt, both of us in this fight going with South Korea's Kyung Ho Kong, which, again, it's deviation from the mean here at Fight Night Picks. It was just like picking Moises to beat Yoel Alvarez. You're on that Alvarez train, you get off it, and look at what happens. So, let us know down below in the comments section who you have between Yaya and Gong. Matt, 2 more fights on this card. You've got Michael Chiesa taking on Sean Brady. It's dynamic. It's a grappler's paradise. And then the main event, Ketlen Vieira against Miesha Tate. You're not going to want to miss it, so keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, as we always say. Let's get into it. Big time fight coming up this weekend in the co-main event of UFC Fight Night, Vieira and Tate, which I'm sure everybody's excited about. This might be the people's main event. We have Maverick Michael Chiesa taking on a yet-to-be-nicknamed Sean Brady, and this is a guy that's snatching up necks and paychecks. Write that on the marquee. This is a guy with maybe the scariest back tattoo next to, Alexander Volkov.
I was going to say, Volkov
UFC?
has the gold medal for it.
I don't know. I think Sean Brady's is better. But this fight here between Sean Brady pits a couple of styles together where fans of MMA grappling, who are the fans that don't go to the Apex, are excited about this one. Because for Chiesa, when it's going his way, he strikes to clinch. He clinches to take down. And once it's on the mat, this is a guy that a lot of people sit there and go, he was a lightweight and he had success? How is that even possible? Because he's giant for welterweight. And for Chiesa, so many different ways to take people down. For Sean Brady, he wants to take you down. He's going to take you down. Like, he is one of the strongest guys, it seems, that we've seen in this division in some time. That's what makes this so interesting. And again, the neat thing about it too, Chiesa, a lot more rangier, a lot more in terms of his reach. And the other thing is, he poses a different ability. He's a southpaw too. So that's what makes this a little bit different, especially when it's on the feet where every fight starts. If it goes to the mat though, geez, I mean, we're in for a treat.
This should be a really fun fight. I'm definitely the most excited for this fight than any other one on the card because Chiesa's in a weird spot. He was a good lightweight. He fought a lot of great lightweights. Makes the transition up to welterweight, which was sort of inevitable. He just couldn't make the 155 weight pound limit anymore. But his welterweight run was very weird because, okay, he beats Diego Sanchez. It is what it is. Sanchez is quite old. He beats Carlos Condit, who, if you're going to beat him, you're going to take him down and submit him. So you can't put a lot of stock into that either. And he looks really, really good against Neil Magny. But that was also a strange fight because Chiesa is in this weird category where he can play the submission hunt heavy game, but he can also kind of play a bit of that lay and pray game, which will be really interesting to see how or who gets the takedown first in this matchup, because whoever's on top is going to win every single one of these exchanges. And it's interesting. We talk a lot, striker versus grappler, grappler versus grappler. These guys are both primary grapplers, but they get it done in very different ways. For Chiesa, it is a lot more of those traditional jiu-jitsu takedowns where he's going for the clinch. He's trying to wrap your legs. It's sort of like an anaconda. It's very progressive from one stage to the next. Now, can Chiesa go out there, shoot double legs, shoot single legs? Yes, of course he does. But he's somebody who'll try to jump to the back on the feet. He'll go for a lot of those crazy submissions and just try to skip step 1, 2, and 3 in pursuit of the submission right away. Now, against somebody like Sean Brady, I don't think you can go for those big Hail Mary techniques because if Chiesa's on top against him, then yeah, I think he can have success against Brady. He'll be able to fish for submissions. He's got great just top control. It's really hard to buck Chiesa off. But the flip side is, I've seen Chiesa off of his back not eat a lot of damage by any means, but at least get held down and get out-muscled in some areas. And like you had mentioned, and it was the perfect setup, that is Sean Brady's game. If he is able to have success early on with the wrestling against Michael Chiesa, then I expect the fight to just keep on going his way. Round 2 and 3. See, I think this fight deserves to be 5 rounds, not the actual main event. But if Brady is struggling to get the takedown, we saw against Jake Matthews. I don't trust Sean Brady's striking very much against top 15 talent. And I know Chiesa's not one of the best strikers in the division, but I'll be honest, and this is where I'll hand it off to you. I still think Michael Chiesa is the better striker.
Okay, think about it this way. Sean Brady is like, what do they call it? Superstar X Factor over on Madden at wrestling. He's got great wrestling. He trains at Renzo Gracie Philly with Pat Sabatini, Jeremiah Wells. There's all sorts of good guys to train over there. And Brady, bread and butter. If you just look at the numbers from UFC 259, Blachowicz versus Adesanya, Sean Brady's fight against Jake Matthews, where he submits him in the 3rd round. I love it when guys get late time, like garbage time submissions, because it's like, hey, well, we went this far, you still have more to go. And that's the nice thing about Brady. Got a wonderful gas tank. Win over Court McGee, took him down. He's a great wrestler. Beat the Austrian wonder boy, Ismail Nardiev, who I wish was still in the UFC. Beat Christian Aguilera, who's an all-or-nothing type of fighter. And then gets that win over Jake Matthews. By the way, performance of the night bonus when he took on Aguilera. Here's the trouble against Jake Matthews if you're just a numbers person. If you just look at total strikes, 133 to 32 for Sean Brady, you're going to go, oh, he mopped the floor with him. And he submitted him, Craig. How could he have any adversity? How could he have struggled in certain positions? Because on the feet, he did. If you go back and watch that fight, he did. So for me, I look at it. Are you always that fighter? No, not necessarily. People can change. People can change, Matt. You can run with the Dangerous Knights crew and you can eat sloppy steaks. But in this fight, there's no sloppy steaks when you're fighting a guy like a Michael Chiesa, because you make a mistake in the stand-up, he's there. You make a mistake on the ground, he's there. You miss one of your transitions, boom, you're locked up in a submission. But for Chiesa, again, you're right. The run at welterweight, it's been weird. Condit was before wrestling Condit. Diego Sanchez was during Josh Fabia. Dos Anjos, not a welterweight. And then Neil Magny, if you're going to beat him, that's how you're going to beat him. You're just going to take him down, rinse and repeat, which is way easier said than done with what I just did. That was a very impressive win.
Against Luque, he looked pretty good in the early stages of that fight. He takes Luque down, he gets on top of him. The issue is that Chiesa has admitted this in the past. This isn't me projecting anything. He's openly said, like, I kind of find a way to lose some of these fights where I'm having a lead, I'm looking really good, and then just sort of, I don't know if it's just a mental gap, if it's just like I lose concentration for 1 second and that's his opponent's able to capitalize. It's interesting because we've seen Chiesa struggle a lot more in the grappling department than we've seen Sean Brady struggle in the grappling. And both these guys are primary grapplers, which would make you think that Brady has the advantage. But this is the flip side, and I always have to bring this up. Michael Chiesa dropped Jorge Masvidal on the feet, and that means a lot to me for some reason. Now, I know it was a stiff shot and Chiesa doesn't have fluid stand-up by any means, but he has shown the ability to at least hurt decent fighters on the feet when he can string together decent shots. And I do feel like this is one of those buy low, sell high type moments for Michael Chiesa where a lot of people's judgment have been clouded by his submission loss to Vicente Luque. Vicente Luque is one of the best fighters in the world. Offensive submissions, striking, like, hey, Sean Brady would have a pretty tough night out there with him too.
Can't weigh in as an alternate for a title fight worth a lick.
Which is unfortunate, but Vicente Luque's proven that, like, hey, he is a championship caliber fighter and he deserves to be fighting at least guys in the title picture. Now, I think Chiesa is going to have a really big rebound performance in this matchup. But again, this all comes down to both guys' wrestling offense. If Chiesa is the one who gets on top of Brady, I think he's going to have a field day with him. Probably not get a lot of damage off in the top position, but at least accumulate enough time to win the round 10-9. One of those like 10-8.5 rounds where he gets a lot of control time, but probably not a lot of damage. The flip side, though, is if Brady gets on top of Chiesa, I think Brady can damage Chiesa when he's in that top position. He's the much more active fighter, especially when he's in that full guard, half guard, full mount type of situation. And that's why I have such a hard time picking this fight, because both these guys do have so many similarities, but Chiesa, I would say, is the slightly more effective striker on the feet, whereas Brady's the more damaging grappler on the mat, but I think Chiesa is probably the better submission specialist out of these two.
If you look at it for the odds, Chiesa open to plus 120. He's a plus 132 right now. For Brady, the undefeated fighter, open to minus 140. Minus 161 right now. If we have a look over on Tapology for the total votes on this fight, yeah, wow. I mean, 891 total votes, 63% Brady, 43% by decision, 37% by submission for the 37% that have Chiesa, 65% by decision, 25% by submission. Matt, to me, this is one of those fights like that old Canadian Guess Who song. Don't give me no hand-me-down shoes. Don't give me no hand-me-down love. Michael Chiesa, where's the hand-me-down love? I haven't seen any of it at all. Where is it?
I don't know. It's very strange because Chiesa has had these big opportunities in the UFC and it always feels like he comes just short of expectations. Go back to the Kevin Lee main event. Go to the Anthony Pettis fight. That was a big opportunity for him too. Now, he missed weight in that fight. He had taken a long time off after the Kevin Lee performance, but still, that was another big opportunity against another big name opponent. If there is, like, maybe just like a mental gap where it's like, okay, I have a hard time against these top-level fighters, I don't think that's going to be there against Sean Brady. I don't think Brady has that same kind of aura around him. I don't think when the going gets tough against Sean Brady, Case is going to look for a way out. Now, if you quit in the past, it means that you have the ability to do it in the future. That's why Charles Oliveira still has a lot of question marks around his durability. Although, against Michael Chandler, he showed the ability to get hurt and get back up. But still, once a fighter has shown that, it's always something in the back of people's minds. This is a really hard pick. I'm not going to lie. Like, this is down the middle as I've had any in a long time. And honestly, if I switch any pick on question mark kicks, it'll probably be this one. I think I'm going to pick Sean Brady, though. And for these reasons. Although Case is the better striker, he doesn't have enough volume on the feet to really put it on Sean Brady and get enough damage early on to make a big difference later on in the fight. Now, if this was a 5-round fight, I would like Case a little bit more. He's been in more 5-round opportunities, he's been in more 5-round fights, and he's shown the ability to still be able to shoot those takedowns later on in fights so that, hey, if things aren't going well for me on the feet, I can take down my more fatigued opponent in that round 4 or round 5 and bank them similar to like a Jan Blachowicz. I don't think he's going to have that ability to do that against Brady. And like I said, I think when Brady gets Chiesa down, he's going to make him pay for it a lot more than Chiesa will be able to do to Brady. I've tried to lay out enough reasons for both guys. I hope I have. But I think my final pick will be Sean Brady.
Fight goes the distance. Only 2 sites that offer it. The average is a plus 120. I mean, for me, I like Chiesa in this one. Again, we talk about who's the better striker. I think Chiesa's the better striker. In terms of the takedown defense, Brady's never been taken down in the UFC. Chiesa, 68% mark, split between 2 different weight classes. And for Brady, a little bit shorter, not as much range, but he's definitely the thicker guy. This is going to be a really tough one. I'd like to get everybody's thoughts down below. We're split on the pick. I'm going with Maverick, the underdog, Michael Chiesa. Matt going with the man with no nickname out of Philadelphia, Sean Brady, to get the win. It should be an awesome one. Yeah. And listen, it's almost going to be UFC commentator versus commentator, Chiesa versus Felder's boy. So it's going to be a really tough one. I absolutely love the fight. And we have a main event after this one. Ketlen Vieira is taking on Miesha Tate. You're not going to want to miss it. Maybe you will, but tune in for some fun. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, we always say. Let's get into it. It's a main event that has to happen. Ketlen Vieira taking on the former champion of this division. You know her as Cupcake Miesha Tate. Matt, if we're on to food references, this fight is as weird as a mega load bar. Now, there's a lot of you out there that are going, what the hell is a mega load bar? I'm going to put it up like
something terrible.
Look at that. There's a cookie on top of a peanut butter cup. There's another cookie on top. And then there's like, not M&Ms because they can't use M&Ms or Oreos or generic chocolate chip cookie. This is so weird though that they only sell it at like an odd gas station near where we live. And it's an odd enough bar that I went on their website today, which hasn't been updated since 2013, because it features like a Kids' Choice Award winner that was on Breaking Bad. Go check it out. Megaload bars are weird. This main event is weird like that too, because
can we get Megaloads on board?
I don't think so after what I just said. But for Miesha Tate, her long-awaited return, she fought Raquel Pennington almost 5 years ago. She fought Marion Renault almost 4 months ago. And then after that fight, they wanted a quick turnaround. They matched her up with Ketlen Vieira, who lost her last fight to Yana Kunitskaya. And I'll get into that fight and why I thought Ketlen won, but maybe she didn't. Either way, Ketlen missed weight. She weighed 138 for that fight. She had a win before that over Sijara Eubanks. None of these fighters really equating to, wow, we should give Ketlen a main event. But the UFC did. And you know what, Matt? This main event wasn't just scheduled for November. This was a fight that was supposed to take place a month ago.
So nice, you got to do it twice.
Miesha Tate tested positive for COVID. And some of you out there are going to go, Craig, but that doesn't mean anything. I'm going to read you a direct quote. The website's MMA Mania, but the interview was with Combat Culture. You know him as This Is Shaq, friend of the program. But this is the quote from Miesha Tate surrounding what had gone through her body. It's still clearing out of my lungs just a little bit, like when I wake up in the morning. Tate tells SB Nation's Combat Culture and MMAmania.com about her COVID recovery. You can hear it a little bit probably in my sinuses still. I still have a little bit of a cough, but it's getting better every day. I had a really tough strength and conditioning workout today, and I feel like I crushed it, so the limitations are getting much less. I think it's just a matter of continuing to work through it and progress. Hopefully this will get rescheduled before too long. Essentially, it cost me 2 weeks of camp. I was pretty sick. Nothing alarming. A little bit of a fever. I had a pretty severe cough. I had sinus congestion. I wasn't sleeping well at night. Taste and smell got weird. It was kind of muted. But the next week, my kids were sick, so I couldn't really even get to the gym to train. I couldn't hire a sitter. I couldn't have anybody come here. I couldn't take them out. I couldn't take them with me. Regardless, it didn't seem like it was terrible, but it also didn't seem like it was that great either. And listen, at the end of the day, it affects everybody differently, and Tate ended up needing about to be totally rescheduled. And I should note that this website was updated September of 2021, so it was just the end of September, a couple weeks before the fight. So unfortunate for Tate. Hopefully she's somewhere near 100% coming into this fight. But listen, man. You miss weight at 138 and lose a fight? Why are we making main events?
Okay, you jumped around a little bit there, so let me
Megaloads.
Okay. Miesha Tate later on in that interview does go on to say, when I show up for this fight, I will be 100% though. So that does have to be said. Like, she's not still dealing with some of those lingering feelings, or at least she said that in the media. Because I'm going to bring this up. I don't watch PFL, and I let that be known. I'm not a big PFL guy. I did watch Kayla Harrison's last fight, though, and I did watch the media leading up to it. She openly admitted that she had a terrible sinus infection, like, in her interview with Ariel Helwani. She was coughing constantly, and she looked all right, and that was the week of the fight. So, like you had said, it affects everybody differently, and it's kind of funny. You've read off, like, 4 paragraphs to say, like, hey, but it doesn't matter.
It was funny because every one was this way, but one was that way.
This is why this fight's going to be so interesting with Ketlen Vieira, because the positions that Vieira is really good at, she is phenomenal at. When she is on top of her opponent, she's got that, like, it's almost like a pancake type of a style. She flattens you out, and you really feel her physicality in there. But I always go back to the Sarah McMahon fight, because she gets put in some bad positions in that fight, but she's able to work out of them. McMahon takes her down. She's doing really well with her wrestling early on, but when Vieira is able to sweep McMahon and get into that top position, she's able to go to work and basically cut through her defenses like a hot knife through butter. The difference, though, is when you're fighting someone like McMahon, who isn't the best defensive grappler, you can start to get some positions here and there throughout the fight that you normally can't do against these other top-level grapplers. With Miesha Tate, though, she's kind of like Sarah McMahon, but with all the intangibles. She's got higher technical IQ. She has higher MMA IQ. I think she's a more defensively sound striker, even though Sarah McMahon, honestly, probably has more pop at the end of her shots in the feet. She's got underrated power. But when I look at Miesha Tate, she fights in a very similar manner as Sarah McMahon, but she doesn't have all those extra holes in her game.
And I mean, Matt, if we're talking about megaloads, which maybe they will come back on board, like, you can't make this stuff up. It's a cookie that looks like an Oreo on top of a peanut butter cup. It's crazy. But still, it's so weird that when you look at this one in the UFC's promo for this fight, that's the free fight that they chose for Ketlen Vieira, because really, that's the only highlight you can go with. She beat Sarah McMahon, a former title challenger. Oh, that fight? 4 years and 2 months ago. Then she beats Kat Zingano by split decision. And by that point, I was sold. We're off to the races. Ketlen could be the next champion. I thought that she had a good shot against Amanda Nunes. And then it was a gut check when Irene Aldana went out there, put everything into that hook, knocked her out. So then she took 10 months off. She beat Sijara Eubanks. That's a good win. And then she fights Yana Kunitskaya. Matt, that's where the notes come in handy, because in that fight, you might go, okay, unanimous decision win for Kunitskaya. Vieira misses weight. Why are we here? I'll tell you why we're here. A, it's to boost Miesha Tate's star. If she wins, it's like, wow, you just won a main event? Maybe after Juliana Pena, you get the fight against Nunes. If Vieira wins, it's, oh, well, you beat a former champion, now you can fight Nunes, even though, like, now everything's forgotten. But in that fight against Kunitskaya, the judges scored the fight. Judge Cologne scored round 1 for Kunitskaya. But the other judges, D'Amato and Junichiro Kamijo, scored it for Vieira. Round 2, all of them scored it for Kunitskaya. Round 3, Cologne scored it Vieira, but the other 2 had it for Kunitskaya. So Kunitskaya wins 29-28 on all 3 judges' scorecards, but different rounds with different judges. MMA decisions, 3 had it 30-29 Kunitskaya. 1 had it 28-27 Drake Riggs for Kunitskaya. 14 had it 29-28 Vieira. And in that fight, if you just look at the stats, they support a giant win for Kunitskaya because she outstrikes the hell out of poor old Ketlen Vieira. The total strikes in that fight, 215-35. The control time relatively close. But Matt, what happened in that fight? Ketlen got her takedowns and then did nothing with
Nothing.
Terrible.
That's my big point. If she gets into a good position, she is very good in those set positions. It's like my OSP point. Is OSP the best grappler in the world? No, not by any means. But when he gets into that Von Flue position, he's like Rodolfo Vieira. You know what I mean? Like some guys just have that one spot that they're very comfortable with, and they excel in that one position. With Ketlen Vieira, it's the head and arm choke offensively. She's shown the ability to get that off on other high-level grapplers in the past, and that's really the key. She's not just getting submission wins over low levels of competition. She has been able to go out there and submit other grapplers, and I think that's an important point to make. But this is the thing about Miesha Tate. We've never seen Miesha Tate get out grappled in a fight. I know she lost by submission to Amanda Nunes, but that was set up because Nunes just detonated power shots in her face until she basically got dropped and then her nose got all messed up. That was just a really bad fight for Tate. Tate really only loses against those high-level strikers who are able to defend her takedown attempts, which isn't a style I think Ketlen Vieira can adopt whatsoever. I know Aldana has a win over Vieira, but they're sort of in the same place in the division, right? They're exciting young prospects. They can beat some good fighters, lose to some good fighters, but they both excel in different positions. I look at what Irene Aldana is able to do in the cage, though, and I think that's a much tougher matchup against someone like Tate because she's able to use her movement a lot, can put together some nice volume, whereas for Vieira to win this fight, I'm going to have to rely her to out-cardio and out-grit Miesha Tate, who won a title based on her grit and cardio. So, just in a 5-round atmosphere, I don't feel like there's any really good reasons to pick against Miesha Tate.
And I'm going to counter one thing that you said, and the fact that, going with Vieira because she has these great submission abilities, and to quote you, she submitted good grapplers. She submitted good grappler.
And no, you're right. And Sarah McMahon has shown the ability to lose by submission, but still, to go out there and get on top and reverse a wrestler is a really impressive thing, especially someone who fights in a similar way to me.
What was it, Olympic silver medalist?
Exactly.
Sarah McMahon.
You want to get taken down? Find Sarah McMahon. She'll do it.
Yeah, look at Gina Mazzani. But Matt, in this fight for Vieira, 92% takedown defense in the UFC. And you look at the level of competition that she's fought, that's where I can kind of poke some holes if I was to go that way. Listen, Kelly Faschholtz, Ashley Evans-Smith, Sarah McMahon, Kat Zingano, Sajara Eubanks. But again, the opposite side. Tate was a former champion. Long layoff, 35 right now. She looked good against a 40-plus-year-old gym teacher, Marion Renault. But listen, I was at the camp that Marion Renault she didn't beat Macy Chasson. So what? Who cares? It doesn't mean that much to me. I still had a decently high level of respect for Marion Renault going into that fight.
Marion Renault hype.
The odds for this one, Vieira open to -160, favorite -113 or thereabouts right now. For Tate, open to +140, -108 right now. Matt, this is when I dig out my bag of tricks, also known as my cell phone, and I go over to the YouTube community tab because I asked the fans at Fight Night Picks, hey fans of Fight Night Picks, who do you have in this fight? What are you saying? And over in that community tab, Matt, fans said 61% Miesha Tate. It was about the same thing in the poll that I put out in our story at Fight Night Picks. We're very easy to find. The comments on this one, Matt. The Road Tree Resistance 95 says the UFC should be paying us for putting this as the main event. Afui is saying Vieira should win this fairly easily. And then we've got another comment from Selman Bundy saying, I'll take Miesha Tate in a 5-rounder. Also, Ketlen has nothing to offer off her back. I'll give Vieira round 1 and 2. And then from 3 to 5, it's going to be Tate. So, Matt, the fans with Tate, the odds still maybe with Vieira, maybe a little bit, maybe
Tate's
not.
the favorite.
Depending on, no, the average is Vieira. If you go by it, Topology right now says Tate, but if you go on best fight odds right now, the average is for Vieira. Tate's still an underdog over there, but that we're going tit for tat. Who cares? This fight right here that we have coming up this weekend, I see Miesha Tate winning this fight. I don't see Vieira finishing her in the first round or two.
I don't think Ketlen Vieira is ever going to become a UFC champion. I don't think she has that kind of a ceiling. I agree with you, though. At one point, I thought she was destined to at least be in the mix. It's hard to say you're going to beat Amanda Nunes.
This could be the fight that gets her there. She very well could win this one. Personally, I just don't see it.
Exactly. Let's be confident in it, Craig. Here's the thing. I think Tate excels in all the area Vieira doesn't. What Vieira's not good at is getting up off her back and fighting through adversity. And again, Miesha Tate's kind of built a career off those principles. Now, if Vieira is able to go in there and let's say she can hurt Tate with a shot early, I doubt it's going to happen, but if she can hurt her early, maybe make her force into one of those panic takedowns, maybe she can grab a guillotine. But this is the thing. I've said maybe about 15 times in the last 30 seconds trying to set up ways for Vieira to win, where the easy game plan and the clear-cut way for Tate is use your pressure, use your volume, just be really physical with Vieira, and you can probably win a decision that way.
Matt, both of us going with Miesha Tate to get the win for the Pacific Northwest. I ate the mega loads. Can confirm it's what you'd expect a mega load to be. So Matt,
you've got to stop talking about mega loads in your mouth, Craig.
Big time fight coming up this weekend, but both of us going with Miesha Tate. An interesting card that really fills in very well. I know for me, the fights I'm looking forward to, the co-main event, Chiesa taking on Sean Brady. Terrance McKinney, Faraz Ziam, Matt, what am I missing? My guy, Ronnie Yaya, taking on Kyung Oh Gong. What are you excited about?
Sean Brady's got a really big opportunity in the co-main event to make a name for himself. He's never fought a ranked opponent before, and the fact that they're giving him somebody who's not only fought in big cards, he's fought as the main event headliner on multiple cards in the past. I think this is a huge opportunity, and this is sort of one of those weird crossroads fights where if Chiesa wins, he can still establish himself as one of the best at 170, but if Brady wins, then he's ready for the top guys.
Make sure you check out Fight Night Picks !Kicks live 2 hours before the prelims here on the channel. You can find that in the channel playlist. I'm sure you've already checked it out by now. And a new look for those individual videos as well. So keep your eye out for all of that here with Fight Night Picks. We got a big week coming up. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. And as we always say, let's get into it.